Long before medicine, before written history, before any civilization tried to measure a human life, the body was already living inside a quiet trade. It could heal, remember, grow, and protect itself. Yet it could not keep doing all of this forever. In the deep past, aging may have been shaped by survival, danger, reproduction, repair, and the limits of energy in a harsh world. Not as a simple mistake and not as a finished answer, but as one of the oldest questions hidden inside the human body. Why did the aging process evolve? Long before the first doctor touched a pulse, before anyone wrote a law about inheritance, before any village counted the years of a human life, the body was already doing something strange. It was repairing itself every day, quietly, without permission. A cut in the skin could close, a broken bone could knit back together, fever could rise against infection, sleep could restore the mind, hunger could sharpen attention, the heart could beat for decades without being asked to begin again. Yet this same body, so full of repair, did not remain unchanged. Strength slowly became harder to keep. Skin lost some of its firmness. Joints carried old movements inside them. Memory, sleep, balance, and healing could all become slower, as if the body remembered not only life, but the cost of staying alive. This is the first quiet mystery behind aging. If the human body was shaped by survival, why was it not shaped to repair itself perfectly forever? In the deep past, this question would not have sounded like a question at all. No early human sat beside a fire and spoke of cellular damage, hormones, genes, or long-term decline. What they knew was more direct. A younger hunter could climb faster. A mother recovering from birth needed strength again. A child with fever might live or die before sunrise. An older person might know the path to water after dry months, but their knees might not carry them as far as before. Aging was not an idea in a book. It was visible in breath, scars, teeth, walking speed, grip, eyesight, and the way the body responded after cold nights, hunger, childbirth, wounds, and years of carrying tools across uneven ground. To understand why aging evolved, we have to begin where human life began, not in hospitals or modern houses, but in landscapes where every body was in agreement with the world around it. The earliest humans and their ancestors lived inside limits that were not gentle. Food came and went, weather changed without warning. Infections entered through small wounds. Predators, falls, broken bones, and childbirth could end a life long before the body ever reached what we now call old age. In such a world, the body's first task was not endless preservation. It had to grow, move, find food, avoid danger, recover enough, and carry life into another generation. That does not answer the question yet, but it changes the shape of it. Aging begins to look less like a single failure and more like a slow trace left by many older pressures. The body was never floating outside history. It was made inside seasons, hunger, fear, care, reproduction, memory, and the fragile safety of a group. When we look at aging today, we often see it from the wrong end of time. We see white hair in a mirror, a slower morning, a name harder to remember, a wound that heals more slowly than it once did. We see the late signs first. But evolution works from the beginning of life forward. It shapes bodies through infancy, childhood, danger, maturity, fertility, caregiving, and survival in a real environment. The question is not only why the old body declines. The deeper question is why the young body was built with enough repair to last for a while, but not with perfect repair that could last without limit. Somewhere in that difference lies the old human mystery. A body can be powerful, intelligent, adaptive, and still finite. It can survive storms, ice, hunger, injury, and grief, yet slowly gather the marks of its own survival. Before we ask why aging exists, we must sit with this paradox. The same body that keeps saving itself also carries the beginning of its own decline. A body does not age all at once. It does not cross a hidden border in a single night. It changes in small, almost silent ways, long before those changes become visible. A young body can fall, bruise, bleed, sleep, and rise again with little memory of the damage. The same body, after many years, may still heal, but more slowly. The skin closes, but not with the same speed. The muscles return, but not with the same ease. The mind rests, but sleep may no longer feel as deep. This is why aging feels so confusing. It is not the absence of repair. It is repair that continues, but becomes less complete, less effortless, less able to erase the past. The mystery is not simply that the body breaks. The mystery is that the body keeps repairing itself for so long, and still does not keep its earlier power forever. In the world where human life began, this slow change would have been felt through ordinary survival. A person who had crossed many seasons carried those seasons in the body. Long walks across hard ground shaped the feet and joints. Smoke from fires touched the lungs and eyes. Chewing tough foods wore the teeth. Cold nights tested blood flow, fat, shivering, and the need to stay close to others. Repeated hunger changed the meaning of strength. A wound from stone, thorn, bone, or animal could become a mark that stayed for life. None of this was separate from aging. The body was not declining in a clean room. It was aging while working, carrying, climbing, birthing, gathering, remembering, and recovering in a world that rarely gave full rest. Modern people often imagine aging as something that begins after the important part of life is over. But for most of human history, there was no clear wall between living and wearing down. The same hands that made tools also collected small injuries. The same legs that walked toward food also spent years under strain. The same immune system that defended the body also used energy and sometimes left inflammation behind. A living body had to choose, not with thought, but with chemistry. It had to send energy where danger was most immediate. It had to repair enough to continue. It had to grow enough to reach maturity. It had to protect children, seek food, and survive the next season. Perfect preservation, if such a thing were possible, would have required endless resources in a world where resources were often uncertain. This does not explain aging fully, but it shows why the question belongs to the deep beginning of human life. The first human bodies were not designed for comfort. They were shaped under pressure. They were shaped in groups, in forests, savannas, cold edges of ice age landscapes, river valleys, caves, shelters, and open ground where life depended on movement and cooperation. A body that could heal a wound was already extraordinary. A body that could survive childhood, reproduce, care for others, and carry memory into later years was even more extraordinary. Yet each success came through tissue, blood, bone, nerve, and energy. Nothing happened outside the body. Every step of survival had a physical cost. This is why the earliest question of aging is not dark. It is quiet. It asks how a creature can be so resilient and still so temporary. It asks why nature shaped repair so carefully but not infinitely. It asks why the body is able to save itself again and again, while slowly becoming a record of every rescue. In that sense, aging is not only a decline seen at the end of life. It is also the long shadow of survival itself. Before we look for causes, theories, or names, we have to notice the first shape of the mystery. The human body is not weak because it ages. It ages after a lifetime of trying not to fail. The first mystery of aging becomes clearer when we stop looking at the body as a machine that should last forever. A machine can be built, repaired, and replaced piece by piece, at least in theory. A living body is different. It grows from a single cell into a breathing person. It builds bone while learning to move. It builds immunity while meeting danger. It builds memory while crossing places that may never be seen again. It does not begin as finished. It becomes itself while already spending energy, taking risks, and responding to the world. This matters because aging is not something added to life from outside. It rises from the same processes that make life possible. Growth, healing, defense, reproduction, movement, and memory all keep the body alive, but none of them are free. They use materials, they create waste, they require timing, they can protect in one moment and leave a trace in another. In the long history before farming, before cities, before written language, this living balance was tested every day. A human body had to be flexible enough to survive many different worlds. It had to move through heat and cold, dry seasons and wet seasons, forests and open ground, hunger and brief abundance. It had to heal without hospitals. sleep without beds, give birth without modern medicine, and learn from older bodies that carried experience in their scars, teeth, posture, and memory. The beginning of the human story was not a place of endless violence, but it was a place of constant biological negotiation. The body was always asking, silently, how much energy should go to repair, how much to movement, how much to reproduction, how much to defense, and how much to simply staying warm through another night. When we ask why the aging process evolved, we are really asking why this negotiation never became perfect. Why did the body become so good at surviving the near future, yet not equally good at preserving itself across every future? That question reaches beyond one person. It reaches into the structure of generations. In a small ancient group, life moved through children, adults, and elders, each carrying different forms of value and risk. The young body could run, climb, fight infection, and recover quickly, but it had little memory of droughts, migrations, animal behavior, or which plants could harm or help. An older body might move more slowly yet hold knowledge that could help others survive. Aging lived inside this exchange. It was not only a private event in muscles and bones, it also belonged to the group, to memory, to care, and to the passing of life from one generation to the next. Still, the body itself paid the cost. Every breath depended on organs that had to keep working. Every memory depended on tissue that had to keep its delicate order. Every year required the body to remain organized against heat, cold, infection, injury, and the slow disorder that comes with being alive. This is why the first answer cannot be simple. Aging is not merely damage, because the body repairs damage. It is not merely weakness, because many older people remain skilled, useful, observant, and deeply important. It is not merely a mistake, because the same forces that lead to decline are tied to survival, growth, and reproduction. The deeper mystery is that life seems to have chosen continuity through generations more reliably than permanence within one body. This does not make one life less meaningful. It makes each life part of a longer chain, where the body receives the past, protects the present, and quietly prepares what comes after it. In that quiet difference, the human story begins to widen. A body can carry firelight, language, children, tools, grief, and memory, but it cannot carry itself unchanged forever. The first step is not to solve the mystery too quickly, but to notice its shape. Aging may be one of the ways time became written into flesh. For most of the time that humans have existed, old age was not a common room that everyone eventually entered. It was more like a narrow clearing at the far edge of a dangerous forest. Some people reached it, and some may have lived long enough to become deeply important to their families and groups. But many lives were cut short by forces that had little to do with aging itself. A fall, a fever, an infected wound, a difficult birth, a season without enough food, a cold night after exhaustion, or the simple danger of moving through wild land could end a life before slow decline had time to show its full shape. This is one of the cold truths behind the evolution of aging. The body was shaped in a world where reaching later life was never guaranteed. Before old age could become a visible stage, the body first had to survive childhood, growth, injury, hunger, infection, reproduction, and the daily uncertainty of staying alive. When modern people think about aging, they often imagine it as the main enemy waiting at the end of life. But in the deep past, the first enemies usually arrived earlier. A child had to survive infancy, when the body was small, warm only with help, and dependent on milk, carrying, shelter, and protection. A young person had to learn food, danger, tools, fire, weather, water, and the rules of the group. An adult had to spend energy on movement, work, pregnancy, birth, nursing, defense, and care. The body was always being asked to spend itself before it could preserve itself. This does not mean ancient humans never grew old. That would be too simple and not honest. Some did live into later years, and evidence from teeth, bones, and archaeological remains suggests that older adults existed in many human groups. But the path to old age was much less protected than it is for many people today. In the beginning of the human story, survival was not spread evenly across the whole lifespan. The early years mattered with a special force because if a body failed before maturity, its story often ended before it could continue through children or knowledge. This is why the question of aging must be placed inside population, not only inside one body. Evolution does not watch a single person sitting quietly at the end of life. It works through many births, many deaths, many risks, and many generations. If most danger comes before or during the years when a person can reproduce and help raise the young, then the strongest pressure falls on those years. The young body must be built well enough to reach maturity. It must repair well enough after injuries. It must fight infections strongly enough. It must find food, move through landscapes, and hold together long enough for life to continue. Later years still matter, especially in humans, where memory and care can help descendants. But the pressure is not the same at every age. The further a body travels beyond the years when reproduction and direct survival of children are most urgent, the quieter some forces of natural selection may become. This idea will need to unfold slowly, because it is easy to misunderstand. It does not mean older lives have no value. Human groups may have depended on older people for knowledge, calm judgment, food skills, stories, roots, and care. It means something narrower and colder. In the long arithmetic of evolution, traits that harm the body late in life can sometimes remain, especially if they do not stop a person from surviving earlier, reproducing, or helping the next generation. Here, aging begins to look different. It is not only the body becoming weaker, it is the result of living in a world where the future was uncertain, and where nature often protected the doorway into life more strongly than the farthest rooms beyond it. To ask why aging evolved, we first have to see how rare and fragile the journey to old age once was. To understand aging in a human way, we have to imagine a world where old age was not promised by the calendar. There were no birthdays marked by paper, no retirement years, no medicine cabinet, no soft bed waiting after the body had been used for too long. Time was measured in seasons, in the return of animals, in the ripening of plants, in the birth of children, in the memory of floods, droughts, fires, and cold. A person who lived many decades carried more than years. They carried proof that the body had crossed dangers that had taken others away. This matters because aging, as we see it now, often appears in protected surroundings. We notice it under electric light, in mirrors, in quiet rooms, in medical language, after many early dangers have already been reduced. But the aging process evolved long before that protection existed. It began in a world where death often came from outside, before decline could finish its slow work from within. An early human body might have been strong, alert, and skilled, yet still vulnerable to a small infection after a cut. A tooth abscess could become more than pain. A broken leg could mean hunger. A difficult birth could take a mother's life at the very moment a new life began. Children could die from illness, cold, or lack of food before their bodies had grown enough to show adult strength. These were not rare possibilities at the edge of life. They were part of the landscape in which human biology was shaped. The body had to be ready for immediate problems first. It had to stop bleeding, fight fever, store energy when food was available, move when the group moved, and recover just enough to face the next day. In that kind of world, the distant future was always uncertain. A body that spent too much energy preserving itself for very late life might not have enough energy for the urgent demands of youth, reproduction, defense, or care. This is not a final answer to why aging exists, but it begins to reveal the old pressure around the question. Natural selection works most strongly where survival and reproduction are most directly affected. If danger removes many lives early, then the traits that help a person survive early dangers can matter more than traits that would only protect the body much later. This is one reason aging must be understood through the shape of ancient populations, not only through the feelings of one aging person. Imagine a small group moving through a changing landscape. There are infants who need warmth and milk. There are children who need protection and teaching. There are young adults who can carry food, make tools, gather plants, hunt, scout, and defend. There are older adults who may know hidden water, safe crossings, animal habits, useful routes, and the memory of a season that once went badly. Each age has value, but each age also stands under different risks. The youngest are fragile because they are not yet independent, Adults are exposed because they must spend energy in the world. The old are valuable in memory and care, yet their bodies may carry more accumulated damage. In this living structure, aging is not simply a private biological event. It is tied to the way generations overlap. It is tied to how long a body must last in order for children to live, skills to be passed on, and the group to continue. The first human communities did not need bodies that lasted forever. They needed bodies that could connect one generation to the next under difficult conditions. That thought is cold, but it is not empty. It does not reduce a person to reproduction, and it does not erase the dignity of later life. It only shows that the forces shaping the body were not guided by our modern hope for long, protected aging. They were guided by survival in a world where every extra year was uncertain, and where reaching old age at all could be the sign of a body that had already survived more than we can easily imagine. The idea that old age was once rare can be easily misunderstood. It does not mean the past was filled only with short lives, or that every ancient person died young. That picture is too flat. Some people did live long lives. Some became grandparents. Some carried memory across decades. Some may have been valued because they had seen many seasons and knew things that younger people could not yet know. Human life has always had variation. Even in harsh environments, there were individuals who survived illness, hunger, injury, childbirth, conflict, and accident, and reached later years with knowledge written into the body. The important point is more careful than saying old people did not exist. The important point is that old age was less protected, less common, and less separated from danger than it is for many people today. It was not a long, expected stage waiting after decades of safety. It was a difficult distance that some bodies managed to cross. This changes how we think about the evolution of aging. In the modern world, many people meet aging as a central fact of life because other dangers have been pushed back. Clean water, antibiotics, surgery, safer childbirth, vaccines, stored food, warm houses, and social systems have allowed many bodies to live long enough for slow decline to become visible. But the body did not evolve under those conditions. The human body began its story in places where survival depended on the strength of the group and the immediate condition of the environment. A child needed warmth before independence. A young adult needed strength before rest. A parent needed enough energy to feed another body while still feeding their own. An older adult, if they lived long enough, could become a keeper of roots, seasons, tools, stories, and warnings. Yet all of them stood inside a world where a small wound, a bad winter, a failed migration, or a dangerous birth could change everything. In that world, aging was partly hidden by earlier death. It was present, but not always allowed to unfold slowly. This matters because evolution is shaped by what happens again and again across generations. If many bodies disappear before late life, then the traits that only cause harm late may not be removed as strongly as traits that harm the young. A weakness that appears after a person has already had children, helped them survive, or passed knowledge forward may remain in the population more easily than a weakness that appears in childhood. This is not a moral statement. It is not saying that later life is unimportant. It is only describing a pressure that has no feelings and no plan. Natural selection does not honor human wishes for a long life. It responds to patterns of survival and reproduction across time. In the deep beginning of human life, those patterns were formed under uncertainty. The body was shaped to pass through the most dangerous gates first. Infancy was one gate. Childhood was another. Maturity was another. Reproduction and care were others. Old age stood farther away, beyond many risks that had already taken many lives. So the body became excellent in certain ways and limited in others. It could repair, but not perfectly. It could defend itself, but sometimes at a cost. It could grow strong, but that strength required energy. It could store memory, but the tissues holding memory also had to age. The slow decline of later life may have been less visible to evolution than the urgent demands that came before it. This is one reason aging feels like such a strange inheritance. We live with bodies that are far better at reaching adulthood than they are at remaining unchanged forever. We carry biology shaped in a world where the future was not guaranteed. Then we ask that biology to last through a longer, safer life than many ancestors could have expected. The mystery of aging begins there, in the distance between ancient danger and modern survival. Old age became more common as human protection grew, but the body still carries the memory of a time when simply reaching old age was already an extraordinary passage. Evolution is often imagined as if it were a careful builder, standing outside life and designing the best possible body. That image is comforting, but it is not how life has worked. Evolution does not begin with a dream of perfection. It begins with bodies already alive, already limited, already carrying whatever they inherited from earlier forms of life. It changes them slowly, through survival, reproduction, accident, pressure, and time. A body does not have to be perfect to continue. It only has to be good enough, in the conditions where it lives, for life to move forward into another generation. This is difficult to accept when we look at aging. The modern mind asks why the body was not made to last longer, why repair was not stronger, why memory was not protected more carefully, why joints, blood vessels, skin, eyes, and organs were not preserved with greater patience. But evolution does not work like a human wish. It does not protect every future version of the body equally. It favors what helps life pass through the dangers that matter most in a real environment. In the beginning of the human story, those dangers were not abstract. They were cold, hunger, infection, injury, childbirth, drought, distance, and the need to live with others. A body that could survive long enough to grow, learn, reproduce, and help children survive had already done something powerful. It did not need to be immortal for its traits to continue. This does not make aging easy to understand. It makes it more honest. The body was never selected in a world where every person expected a long and protected old age. It was shaped among uncertain seasons, shifting food sources, wounds without modern treatment, and small groups where every living person depended on other living bodies. If a child survived, if an adult found food, if a mother recovered, if a father returned, if an older person remembered a water source, the group carried on. In that setting, the body's success was measured first by continuity, not permanence. The body had to build muscle, bone, immunity, fertility, attention, fear, sleep, and social bonds under pressure. Each one helped survival, but each one used energy. Nothing in a living organism is free. Even repair has a cost. To repair tissue, the body needs materials. To fight infection, it must spend energy and sometimes inflame itself. To grow, it must divide cells, and cell division must be controlled carefully. To reproduce, it must redirect enormous resources toward another life. To store memory, it must maintain delicate networks inside the brain. These processes are miracles in the quiet sense, but they are not limitless. They are compromises made by a body that must live now, not by an architect designing forever. This is why the evolution of aging may begin with a colder idea. Nature can favor a body that is strong for the necessary span of life, even if that body later carries unfinished debts. Some debts are tiny at first, a bit of damage repaired imperfectly, a protein folded wrongly, a cell that no longer behaves as cleanly as before, a blood vessel that stiffens slowly, a joint that keeps the memory of old strain, a system of defense that once saved life but later becomes less balanced. These are not dramatic failures. They are the slow accounting of being alive. For ancient humans, this accounting began in the same place as everything else. On the ground, under weather, near fire, beside children, inside a group, with the body spending itself to remain part of tomorrow. The important thing is not to say that evolution wanted aging. Evolution does not want. It has no intention, no kindness, no cruelty. It preserves what works well enough under the pressures of time. A body that can heal every wound perfectly forever would be beautiful to imagine, but such a body would require a level of maintenance that life may never have needed, or may never have been able to afford. Human beings inherited a different kind of body, not a permanent vessel but a living bridge. It carries the past into the present, carries children into the future, and slowly absorbs the cost of that passage. In this view, aging is not yet an answer. It is the first sign that evolution built for continuation before it built for forever. A body built only for forever would have to make different choices from the body we actually inherited. It would have to repair every small error before it grew larger. It would have to protect every cell from wear, every vessel from stiffening, every joint from strain, every memory from fading, and every organ from the slow disorder that comes with time. It would have to do this while also moving, digesting, sleeping, fighting infection, healing wounds, carrying children, feeding them, learning danger, and staying warm through difficult nights. Such a body is easy to imagine in a quiet modern room, where food may be nearby and danger feels distant. It is much harder to imagine in the older world where human biology took shape. There, the body could not spend energy as if the future were guaranteed. It had to spend energy as if tomorrow mattered first. This is one of the most important ways to understand aging, without rushing into a simple answer. The body is not only a thing that breaks down, it is a living budget. Every day, even at rest, it must decide where its limited resources go. Some energy goes to the brain, which is costly but vital for memory, attention, language, planning, fear, and social life. Some goes to muscles, because ancient humans had to walk, climb, carry, gather, dig, and sometimes run. Some goes to the immune system, because a tiny wound in the deep past could become a life-threatening infection. Some goes to reproduction, pregnancy, nursing, and the long care of children, which in humans became unusually demanding. Some goes to repairing the body itself, quietly correcting damage that the person never sees. The problem is that all of these needs are real, but the supply is not infinite. In the beginning of human life, there were no stored calories waiting in a kitchen, no warm room after every cold day, no guaranteed rest after injury. A body that saved too much for distant old age might fail in a nearer emergency. A body that refused to spend energy on reproduction or defense in order to preserve itself perfectly might leave no descendants to carry its careful design forward. This does not mean aging was chosen like a purpose. It means the conditions of life may have allowed imperfect maintenance because imperfect maintenance was still enough for survival across generations. The young body had to be strong enough to reach maturity. The adult body had to be flexible enough to recover, reproduce, care, and continue. Later decline could remain partly hidden behind earlier success. A person might pass life forward long before the deepest costs of time appeared. This is why the phrase survival of the fittest can mislead us if we hear it as survival of the longest-lasting body. In the deep human past, fitness was not the same as endless duration. It was the ability of a living line to continue. A body could be highly successful in evolutionary terms while still being temporary. It could be strong in youth, skilled in adulthood, useful in later years, and still not built for permanent repair. The body's value was not measured by whether it escaped time completely. It was measured by whether life moved through it into other lives. This older logic can feel cold, because each person experiences aging from inside one body, not from the viewpoint of generations. A stiff hand is not a theory. A slower recovery is not an abstraction. A fading memory can feel like a private loss, not a biological trade, but the body was shaped long before modern self-awareness turned aging into a personal fear. It was shaped when survival meant crossing real ground with other people, sharing food, carrying children, keeping fire, reading weather, and living long enough for knowledge to matter. In that world, a body did not need to defeat time in order to serve life. It needed to hold together through the years when holding together changed the future of others. The unfinished question is why this balance took the shape it did in humans. Enough repair to create long memory, long childhood, deep care and culture, but not enough repair to keep the same strength forever. Somewhere inside that balance, aging begins to look like the shadow cast by a body built for continuation rather than permanence. The thought that evolution does not design for forever can feel strange, because every living body seems to resist death with great seriousness. The body clots blood when it is cut. It raises fever when infection appears. It repairs bone after a break. It stores fat against hunger. It wakes at danger. It protects the young with hormones, fear, attachment, and care. Life does not behave as if it is careless. It behaves as if every moment matters. Yet the body that guards itself so carefully still changes with age. This is the paradox at the center of the question. The same living system that fights so hard to stay alive does not preserve itself without limit. It defends the present with extraordinary skill, but it does not keep the future untouched. To understand this, we have to return again to the first human landscapes, where the body was never separate from the world pressing against it. Imagine a small group moving through a dry season. Food is not absent, but it is uncertain. Water is known, but not always near. Children must be carried or watched. Tools must be kept. Fire must be protected. Sleep is light, because the night is not empty. In such a world, the body cannot behave like a treasure locked away for later. It has to spend itself. The muscles spend energy so the person can walk. The immune system spends energy so a small wound does not become fatal. The brain spends energy to remember paths, faces, dangers, and patterns in the land. The reproductive body spends energy so another generation can begin. Even calm survival is expensive. Every day asks the body to choose between repair now, movement now, defense now, hunger now, and care now. The body does not choose with language. It chooses through chemistry, hormones, cells, appetite, fatigue, pain, fear, warmth, and sleep. In that older world, a body that saved all its resources for perfect long-term maintenance might not survive the immediate test. It might fail to move far enough, heal fast enough, feed a child, fight infection, or endure cold. Evolution would not reward the idea of a perfectly preserved body if that preservation made the living body less able to meet urgent demands. This is where aging begins to appear as a slow consequence of priority, not a plan. Not a punishment, not a single error, a consequence of being alive under limits. The human body became a bridge between short danger and long continuity. It needed to be strong enough to reach adulthood, flexible enough to recover from ordinary harm, social enough to live with others, and caring enough to keep children alive through a long, dependent childhood. Humans are unusual because childhood lasts so long, learning matters so much, and survival depends heavily on knowledge shared across people. That made the body more than a private vessel. It became part of a chain of care. A person survived not only by having strong muscles, but by being fed, warmed, carried, taught, warned, and remembered by others. In this chain, one body did not need to remain perfect forever for the human line to continue. It needed to last long enough, and well enough, to take part in the passing of life, skill, and memory. This is not a complete answer, because aging is too complex to belong to one idea. Many forces may be involved: accumulated damage, imperfect repair, late-acting genetic effects, the cost of reproduction, the weakening force of selection with age, and the simple fact that living tissue must constantly fight disorder. But the direction of the question becomes clearer. Evolution does not see the future as we feel it. We feel the whole arc of one life from the inside. We fear losing strength because that strength belongs to us. We grieve the slower body because it carries our memories. Evolution works differently. It moves through many lives, not one. It can keep a design that carries life forward, even if that design does not protect every later year equally. The older human body, then, is not proof that the body was badly made. It is proof that the body was made inside time, scarcity, risk, and inheritance. A face with lines, a hand with stiffness, a slower step, a memory that needs more quiet to return. These are not separate from the ancient world. They are distant echoes of a body that spent itself to live, to care, to recover, and to continue. Aging may begin to make sense only when we stop asking why the body failed to become eternal, and begin asking what kind of world shaped a body that could survive so much, yet not remain unchanged forever. The body does not receive energy as a gift without limits. Every breath, every step, every small repair must be paid for from something the body has gathered, stored, burned, or borrowed from its own tissues. This is easy to forget in a modern life where food may appear on a table with little direct contact with hunger, weather, or distance. But for ancient humans, energy was never an abstract number. It was the strength in the legs after a long search for food. It was warmth held through the night. It was milk made for a child. It was fever rising against infection. It was the ability to stand again after injury. It was the difference between a body that could move with the group and a body that might be left behind by circumstance, not cruelty. To understand why aging evolved, we have to enter this older economy of the body, when nothing was free and every form of survival drew from the same deep well. A human body must repair itself, but repair is only one demand among many. It must also grow from infancy into adulthood. It must build a brain large enough to remember faces, dangers, tools, language, and the hidden patterns of a landscape. It must maintain muscle for walking, carrying, climbing, gathering, digging, and sometimes fleeing. It must keep the immune system ready for wounds, parasites, spoiled food, and invisible infection. It must reproduce. And in human beings, reproduction is not a brief event. Pregnancy, birth, nursing, carrying, feeding, protecting, and teaching a child require long commitment from the body and the group. In the first human worlds, this was not happening in comfort. It was happening under cold skies, in dry seasons, near smoky fires, beside rivers that changed, and across ground that did not forgive weakness. If the body had unlimited energy, perhaps it could repair every cell perfectly, protect every tissue from wear, preserve every organ without decline, and still do everything else. But life did not evolve inside unlimited energy. It evolved inside trade. This trade is not a conscious decision. The body does not sit quietly and choose one future over another. It acts through hunger, hormones, fatigue, sleep, inflammation, growth, fertility, and the silent chemistry of cells. When food is scarce, the body may reduce some functions to protect others. When infection appears, energy moves toward defense. When a child is growing inside the womb or feeding at the breast, the mother's body redirects enormous resources toward another life. When cold presses into the night, the body must use energy simply to keep its inner temperature within a narrow range. All of these needs are ancient. They reach back to the beginning of human life, and even beyond humans, into the older mammal body that had to keep itself warm, nourish young, and survive long enough for care to matter. Aging begins to look different when seen from this place. It may not be the result of one failure, but the slow cost of many necessary successes. The body succeeds when it heals a wound, but the repair may not restore the tissue exactly as it was before. It succeeds when inflammation holds back infection, but repeated defense may leave its own traces. It succeeds when cells divide to grow and replace damaged tissue, but division must be controlled, and control is never effortless. It succeeds when it builds strength in youth, but strength requires maintenance, and maintenance requires fuel. The body succeeds again and again, and still each success belongs to a world of limits. This is why the question of aging cannot be separated from hunger, reproduction, cold, movement, and care. The ancient body was not only trying to remain young, it was trying to stay alive today, to protect another body, to recover from yesterday, and to be ready for tomorrow. Perfect repair for distant old age may have been less urgent than enough repair for the next season. This does not make aging simple. It makes it more deeply human. Every line of age in the body may carry the memory of an old exchange, energy spent on growth instead of perfect preservation, on children instead of permanent strength, on immune defense instead of untouched tissue, on movement instead of rest. In this quiet trade between repair and reproduction, between the present body and the next generation, we begin to see why life could be powerful without being endless. Energy moves through a living body like a quiet river, but it does not flow everywhere with equal force. When one place needs more, another place may receive less. This is not a flaw in one person. It is part of the ancient structure of life. A body that has eaten well can warm itself, walk farther, repair tissue, keep the brain alert, and defend against infection. A body that has eaten poorly must become more careful. It may slow growth, reduce fertility, draw from stored fat, break down muscle, deepen fatigue, or make rest feel necessary even when danger has not disappeared. These responses are not signs of weakness alone. They are old survival adjustments. They come from a time when the human body lived close to the edge of available food, and every choice inside the body had to answer a simple pressure. What must be protected first? In that older world, repair was important, but repair had to share the body with reproduction. This is where aging begins to touch one of the deepest trades in biology. A body can use energy to maintain itself, or it can use energy to create and support another life. In humans, this trade became especially heavy because human children are born dependent, slow to mature, and costly to raise. A newborn cannot walk away from cold. A child cannot find enough food alone. A young brain needs years of teaching, touch, language, protection, and patience. This means reproduction in humans is not only the making of a baby, it is the long carrying of life after birth. The mother's body spends energy through pregnancy and nursing. Other adults may spend energy gathering food, watching children, defending space, keeping fire, and remembering where resources can be found. The group becomes part of the reproductive body, but the biological cost still begins in flesh. Long before villages and written records, this cost would have shaped the rhythm of human survival. A woman's body had to divide resources between her own tissues and the growing or nursing child. A man's body, depending on the group and environment, might spend energy moving farther, hunting, carrying, protecting, or sharing food. Older adults might spend less energy on reproduction itself, but more on knowledge, childcare, and group stability if they lived long enough. No age stood outside the economy of energy. Everyone lived inside it. In this light, aging is not separate from family, hunger, and care. It is connected to the way a body gives itself to the future. This does not mean reproduction causes aging in a simple way. Life is not that narrow. Some organisms reproduce once and die quickly. Others reproduce many times and live long. Some animals repair slowly. Others repair with surprising strength. Humans belong to a particular history, with large brains, long childhood, social dependence, and bodies that must balance many demands across many years. The trade is not one switch, it is a whole pattern. Still, the pattern matters. If energy spent on perfect maintenance reduced the ability to reproduce, care, or survive immediate stress, that perfect maintenance might not be favored. If energy spent on growth, fertility, immune defense, or caregiving allowed the next generation to live, then some later cost might remain in the body's design. The ancient body could not wait for a peaceful future before spending itself. It had to spend itself inside the present. A hungry season did not ask whether the bones would remain strong at 70. A fever did not ask whether inflammation would have a cost decades later. A pregnancy did not ask whether every tissue could be preserved exactly as before. The body answered near demands with near solutions. It protected life in the form that was most urgent. Later, after many seasons, those answers could leave traces. The body might still heal, but more slowly. It might still move, but with less reserve. It might still defend itself, but less precisely. It might still remember, but with more effort. These changes are not proof that life was badly built. They are signs that life was built under pressure, where the same energy had to support repair, birth, milk, warmth, movement, immunity, and care. To ask why aging evolved is therefore to ask why a body shaped for survival did not place endless maintenance above everything else. The quiet answer has not fully arrived yet, but the direction is becoming clearer. The human body was not only preserving itself, it was helping life pass through danger, through children, through groups, through memory, and through time. There is a quiet sadness in the idea that a body must divide itself. It cannot give everything to repair, everything to strength, everything to children, everything to immunity, everything to memory, and everything to rest at the same time. A living body is always distributing a limited inheritance. It receives food from the land, oxygen from the air, warmth from shelter or fire, sleep from safety, and help from other people. Then it turns these things into movement, healing, thought, milk, blood, bone, and defense. In a protected modern life, this can seem invisible. The body seems simply to function until it begins to fail. But in the older world where human life took shape, the cost of function was closer to the surface. A long day without enough food could be felt in the legs. A cold night could be felt in the chest and fingers. A difficult birth could be felt for months. A wound could pull energy away from movement. A child's hunger could change the strength of an adult. Nothing inside the body was separate from the world outside it. This is why the trade between repair and reproduction is not only a biological idea, it is also a historical image of human life near its beginning. Picture a small group, after a lean season. There is no abundance large enough to make every body safe. The children need food first, because their bodies are still building themselves. The nursing mother needs food, because another life is drawing from her. The injured person needs rest, but rest may mean others must carry more. The older person may know where food was found in a previous drought, but the path may be far. The young adults may have the strength to travel, but strength can be spent faster than it returns. The body of each person becomes part of a larger balance. Survival is not individual in the simple modern sense. It is shared, but the sharing still happens through bodies that tire, hunger, heal, and age. In that world, perfect self-maintenance would not only be expensive, it might also be selfish from the viewpoint of life continuing, though the body itself has no such moral language. If one body preserved every tissue perfectly by refusing the costs of reproduction, care, defense, and risk, its own future might be longer, but the chain beyond it could weaken. Evolution does not reward the body that saves itself in isolation. It tends to preserve patterns that allow life to continue through descendants and kin, through children and group survival, through memory and cooperation. Humans are especially shaped by this, because a human child is a long promise. It requires years of food, warmth, teaching, watching, carrying, and protection. This means the adult body became deeply tied to the future of another body. The price of that time may not be visible in a single day. It may appear slowly, as reduced reserve, slower recovery, worn joints, changed hormones, weakened tissues, and the gradual marks of life spent in service of staying alive and helping others stay alive. Still, we have to be careful. Aging cannot be explained by reproduction alone. Some people do not reproduce and still age. Some animals reproduce heavily and age differently. Some long-lived species show that biology can build stronger maintenance under certain conditions. So the trade is not a complete answer. It is one window. Through that window, we can see why evolution might not always favor the strongest possible repair. Strong repair is useful, but only if it fits within the whole life pattern of the species. For ancient humans, that pattern included long childhood, social care, learning, movement, danger, and uncertain food. The body had to remain useful across many years, but it did not have to remain unchanged forever. It had to carry enough strength into adulthood, enough resilience into parenting and caregiving, enough memory into later life, and enough repair to survive ordinary damage. Beyond that, time could begin to show what the body had spent. This is where the cold trade becomes almost tender. Aging may be tied to the same forces that made humans capable of care. A body grows old not simply because it was neglected by evolution, but because life was carried through it with costs that could not be erased. The hands that fed children, the feet that crossed hard ground, the immune system that fought small invisible enemies, the brain that remembered danger and belonging, all of them used energy, and all of them left some trace. To ask why the aging process evolved is to ask why life chose a path where bodies were strong enough to give, but not untouched by giving. The question remains open, but the shape of it is becoming quieter and more human. Perhaps the body was never only built to keep itself young, but to spend part of itself so life could keep moving. The body carries time in places too small to see. Long before a face changes, before a step slows, before a person notices that sleep no longer repairs them in the same way, quiet changes are already gathering inside cells. A cell is not a tiny stone. It is alive with work. It copies instructions, makes proteins, uses energy, repairs damage, sends signals, removes waste, and responds to the needs of the whole body. Every moment of survival depends on this hidden labor. When a wound closes, cells are working. When an infection is resisted, cells are working. When muscle returns after strain, cells are working. When the brain stores a memory of a face, a voice, a path, or a danger, cells are working. Aging begins to feel different when we understand that the body is not only aging in bones, skin, and hair, it is aging through countless small acts of maintenance that never become perfect. In the deep past, no human could see this hidden world. An ancient person could not look into a cell or name DNA, mitochondria, proteins, or inflammation, but they could see the larger shadow of the same process. They could see that some wounds healed cleanly and others left stiffness. They could see that teeth wore down after years of chewing roots, seeds, meat, and tough plants. They could see that eyes changed, skin changed, strength changed, and recovery after cold, hunger, childbirth, or injury was not the same in every year of life. The body remembered damage before anyone understood what damage was made of. It remembered in scar tissue, in worn joints, in missing teeth, in slower movement, in weaker grip, in the careful way an older person might rise from the ground near the fire. These visible signs were not separate from the invisible cell. They were the surface of a deeper story. To ask why aging evolved is to ask why this hidden repair system was powerful enough to keep life going, but not powerful enough to erase every trace of living. Modern biology gives us words for some of these traces, but the words should be used gently. DNA can be damaged. Proteins can lose their proper shape. Energy-producing parts of the cell can become less efficient. Some cells stop dividing and remain in the body in a changed state. Tissues can become less flexible. The immune system can become less balanced. None of these things alone is aging by itself, and none should be treated as the single answer. Aging is more like a slow conversation among many forms of disorder and repair. The body is always trying to keep its inner world organized, but being alive constantly creates new reasons for organization to fail. Heat, oxygen, sunlight, infection, food, movement, stress, reproduction, and ordinary metabolism all leave small effects. Most of the time, the body answers them. It repairs, removes, replaces, cleans, rebuilds, and adapts. Yet over many years, some traces remain. In the first human environments, these small traces were not abstract. They were gathered through real life on real ground. A person might walk thousands of miles across a lifetime, sleep on hard surfaces, breathe smoke from fire, carry children, lift wood, dig roots, process hides, break bones, survive fevers, endure hunger, and recover from injuries without modern help. Each event might be survived, but survival did not always return the body to its beginning. The body could continue and still carry a mark. This is one reason aging feels like the body's memory of time. It is not memory in the way the mind remembers a story. It is memory in tissue. A scar remembers a wound. A joint remembers repetition. An artery may remember pressure. A tooth remembers food. A cell may remember stress and chemical changes that influence how it behaves later. The ancient body was a living archive, long before writing, long before medicine, long before any civilization tried to preserve a name in stone. It carried a record of weather, food, danger, care, birth, movement, and repair. The mystery is that this record was not simply erased. The body kept enough order to live, yet not enough to remain new. In that quiet difference, we begin to see aging not as a sudden collapse, but as the slow accumulation of life that could be survived, but not completely forgotten. Inside every living cell, survival depends on order. The body must keep its instructions readable, its proteins folded into useful shapes, its membranes intact, its energy flowing, and its signals clear enough for one tissue to speak to another. This order is not fixed like a stone wall. It has to be rebuilt constantly. The body is more like a small fire that must be fed, protected from wind, and cleared of ash. If the fire burns too weakly, life cannot move. If it burns too strongly or too chaotically, it can damage what it is trying to protect. Aging begins to appear in that fragile middle space, where the body keeps restoring order, but never restores it perfectly forever. In the ancient world where human life began, this cellular struggle was hidden beneath ordinary experience. A person did not know that oxygen could help power the body while also contributing to chemical stress. They did not know that copying genetic instructions could sometimes introduce errors, or that proteins could slowly lose their shape, or that cells might become tired of dividing and remain behind like quiet witnesses of earlier injury. What they knew was the larger pattern. A body that had endured many years did not respond exactly like a body still near the beginning of adulthood. The older body might still be wise, steady, and useful, but the wound took longer, the cold sank deeper, the climb required more patience, and illness could leave a longer shadow. Beneath those visible changes were millions of small repairs, some successful, some incomplete. some simply delayed by the many needs of survival. It is important not to imagine damage as a single enemy. Life itself produces wear because life is active. Muscles contract and create strain. Food is broken down and transformed into energy. Immune cells attack invaders and sometimes disturb nearby tissue. Skin meets sun, wind, smoke, and dryness. Bones rebuild under weight. The gut sorts nourishment from threat. The brain keeps its delicate patterns while remembering paths, faces, danger, loss, and belonging. Every useful action has a physical side. Even rest is active, because during sleep the body adjusts hormones, clears waste, repairs tissue, and steadies the nervous system. For early humans, sleep often happened near fire, under shelters, in caves, under trees, or on ground that still carried the cold of night. The body repaired itself there, but it repaired itself inside a world that kept asking for more. The hidden cost of aging may lie partly in the fact that repair is never isolated from life. A cell-repairing DNA is also part of a body that may be hungry. A tissue rebuilding after injury is also part of a person who may need to walk with the group. An immune system fighting infection is also using energy that could have gone to strength, warmth, fertility, or growth. In a world of uncertain food, no system could always receive everything it needed. Some repairs would be good enough. Some errors would be controlled rather than erased. Some damaged cells would be removed. Others might remain, changed but not gone. Across years, the body became a record of what had been survived without being fully restored. This is why aging cannot be understood only as weakness. It is also a history of maintenance under pressure. A scar is not only damage, it is evidence that the body closed a wound. A worn tooth is not only loss, it is evidence of years of eating real food from a difficult landscape. A slower recovery is not only failure, it is evidence that the body has repaired itself many times before. The first humans did not carry written archives, but their bodies carried archives of another kind. Long before clay tablets, temples, graves, or carved bones, tissue remembered the environment. It remembered smoke, hunger, cold, walking, infection, childbirth, lifting, sleeping on hard ground, and the repeated labor of staying alive. The mystery is that these memories became heavier with time. The body could continue to defend its order, but the defense itself had a history. Aging, seen from this quiet depth, may be the slow result of life asking cells to remain organized, while the world kept writing new marks into them. If the body could erase every mark of living, aging would be easier to understand as a problem that evolution simply failed to solve. But the body does not erase life, it carries life. It carries the small chemical disturbances of breathing, eating, moving, healing, defending, growing, and remembering. It carries heat, cold, hunger, smoke, sunlight, childbirth, fever, grief, sleep, and labor in forms too small for the eye to see. This does not mean every hardship leaves a clear permanent wound. The body is much more active and intelligent than that. It repairs constantly. It replaces cells. It rebuilds proteins. It cleans damaged parts. It calms inflammation. It restores balance after stress. Yet the older body is not simply the young body repeated many times without change. Something gathers, not like dust on an object, but like the deep history of a landscape. A path walked often becomes slightly different from untouched ground. A riverbank shaped by many seasons does not return to its first form after each flood. A body, too, survives by changing, and some of those changes remain. In the deep beginning of human life, this truth lived inside ordinary experience. A person who had seen many seasons might have carried old injuries in the shoulder, old hunger in the shape of the body, old childbirth in the pelvis and tissues, old smoke in the eyes, old chewing in the teeth, old walking in the feet. These were not signs of failure alone, they were signs of survival. The same body that had been cut had closed. The same body that had been cold had warmed itself. The same body that had been hungry had kept moving. The same body that had been sick had returned to the group. Aging, in this sense, was not only the coming of weakness, it was the visible and invisible record of how often the body had managed to continue. Modern science can name parts of this record, but the names are only doors into a larger mystery. Cells can suffer damage to their genetic instructions. Protective ends of chromosomes can shorten as cells divide. Proteins can lose their proper shape. Energy systems can become less efficient. Some cells can enter states where they no longer divide normally, but still send signals into nearby tissue. The immune system can become less precise with age, sometimes weaker against new threats and sometimes too active in the background. These processes do not move separately like isolated stories. They speak to one another. A less efficient energy system can influence repair. Poor repair can influence inflammation. Inflammation can influence tissue. Tissue changes can influence movement, sleep, and strength. Aging is not one broken thread. It is many threads slowly tightening around the living body. But even here, we must stay careful. These biological changes help describe aging. They do not turn aging into one simple answer. The body is not a clock that runs down in a single straight line. It is a community of cells, organs, signals, memories, and repairs. Some people age more slowly in certain ways, others more quickly. Some tissues remain strong while others weaken. Environment, food, infection, work, stress, rest, family history, and chance all shape the path. Ancient humans would have known this without the language of biology. They would have seen that not all older bodies were the same. One elder might still walk far. Another might be held back by old injury. One face might keep sharp attention. Another person might lose strength after illness. Aging had patterns, but it was never identical from one body to another. That variation matters because it reminds us that aging evolved inside real lives, not in a clean theory. The first humans were not abstract examples of biology. They were breathing bodies beside fires, under stars, near rivers, in dry grass, in cold wind, holding children, carrying tools, watching the sky, and remembering where life had once been possible. Their cells were doing the same quiet work ours do now, preserving order for another day. The difference is that their world made the cost of that preservation visible. When the body remembered damage slowly, it was also remembering the beginning of the human story. It was remembering that life had always required repair, and that repair had always taken place inside limits. The mystery of aging grows deeper here. The body does not decline because it never fought for itself. It declines after fighting for itself for years, after close-in. There is another quiet reason aging is so difficult to see clearly. Natural selection is strongest where life is still standing near the doorway of continuation. It is strongest when a trait affects whether a body reaches maturity, whether it can survive the dangerous years of growth, whether it can reproduce, whether it can help children live long enough to become independent. The younger body stands under a brighter light in evolution's long pattern, because what happens early can change whether a life continues into another generation at all. Later in life, the light does not disappear, especially not in humans where older people can hold memory, care, and knowledge, but it can become less direct. A harmful change that appears in childhood may stop the story before it has begun. A harmful change that appears only after children have been born, fed, protected, and taught may be carried forward more easily. This is a cold idea, and it must be handled carefully. It does not say that old age has no meaning. It says that the forces shaping bodies do not weigh every year of life in the same way. In the world where human life began, this difference would have mattered deeply. Imagine a group living through many seasons, with infants carried close to warmth, children learning which plants to avoid, adolescents testing their strength, adults gathering, hunting, repairing tools, sharing food, and older people watching patterns that younger eyes had not yet learned. Every life mattered to the group in some way, but every age faced a different kind of evolutionary pressure. A weakness that made infancy more fragile could remove a person before they ever joined the chain of care. A weakness that struck during the years of food gathering, mating, pregnancy, nursing, or defense could change whether children survived. But a weakness that appeared much later, after a person had already contributed to descendants and knowledge, might leave less of a mark on which traits were passed on. This is one reason aging can remain built into living bodies without being directly chosen as a purpose. It may be allowed by the uneven strength of selection across the lifespan. To feel what this means, we have to return to the deep beginning of human time. A body in that world was not promised 60, 70, or 80 protected years. It was tested early. The newborn body had to survive cold, hunger, infection, and dependence. The growing child had to survive accidents, disease, and the long process of learning. The young adult had to survive distance, risk, birth, injury, and the labor of helping others. These stages formed narrow gates. Traits that helped a body pass through those gates were seen again and again in the future. Traits that caused trouble only after the gates had already been crossed were less exposed to the same pressure. This does not make aging inevitable in one simple way, but it helps explain why late life decline could persist. Biology can carry delayed costs because the future is not judged evenly from the beginning of life to the end. One way to imagine this is to think of a path through a dangerous landscape. The first bridges must hold or no one reaches the far valley. A bridge near the beginning must be strong. A bridge much farther away still matters to those who reach it, but if many travelers never get that far, the pressure to strengthen it may be different. The human body is not a path made of wood and stone, but the pattern is similar. Early survival was tested again and again. Late decline was real, but it often appeared after the body had already done much of what allowed the lineage to continue. This is why natural selection can become quieter with age. It is not silent. In humans, it may still speak through grandparents, shared knowledge, childcare, and group stability, but it may speak with less force against damage that appears late. A body can carry hidden weaknesses that remain harmless in youth, then become visible when time has already passed through reproduction, care, and survival. Aging may grow partly from these late arriving costs, from biological problems that were not strongly removed because they waited until later rooms of life. The mystery deepens here. The body was shaped to cross the early gates with remarkable power, but beyond those gates, some shadows were allowed to remain. A harmful trait does not always announce itself at the beginning of life. Some problems wait. They sit quietly in the body for years, hidden behind strength, fertility, quick healing, and the strong reserves of youth. A young person may carry a biological tendency that does almost nothing while the body is still growing, moving, reproducing, and caring for children. Only much later, when tissues have been used for many seasons, when repair has become slower, when the immune system has changed, when hormones have shifted, and when accumulated damage has made the body more fragile, that hidden tendency may begin to matter. This is one of the important ideas behind the evolution of aging. The body can inherit costs that arrive late, because late arriving costs may not have been strongly removed by the pressures that shaped earlier survival. In the deep human past, the earliest years of life were the most heavily tested. A newborn needed warmth, milk, touch, and protection. A child needed to survive infection, hunger, falls, cold, and the long dependence that makes human childhood so unusual. A young adult needed to move through the land, learn the group's knowledge, find food, endure injury, reproduce, and help children survive. These years stood directly in the path of continuation. If a trait harmed the body during those years, it could be strongly filtered out across generations. But if a trait harmed the body only after many of those tasks had already been completed, it could remain more easily, not because it was good. Not because aging was chosen as a goal, simply because the body's later future was less exposed to the sharpest edge of selection. There is also a second, more troubling possibility. Some traits may help early life while costing the body later. A strong growth signal may help a young body develop, recover, and reproduce, but the same kind of signal, in a different age or tissue, may carry risks. A powerful immune response may help fight infection in youth, but long background inflammation later in life may slowly disturb tissues. A body that stores energy well may survive hunger, pregnancy, nursing, or winter more successfully. Yet in a different environment or later age, the same tendency may have other consequences. These examples must be handled gently, because aging is not caused by one switch, but the pattern is important. A feature can be useful in the early rooms of life and costly in the later rooms. In ancient landscapes, early usefulness could matter greatly. If it helped a child grow, an adult recover, a parent feed a child, or a group survive a hard season, the later cost might not prevent it from being passed on. This idea makes aging feel less like a clean breakdown and more like a delayed echo. The body may be paying old debts from mechanisms that once protected it. The same fire that warms the camp can leave smoke in the eyes. The same path that leads to water can wear the feet. The same fear that keeps a person alert at night can disturb rest if it never fully quiets. In a living body, protection and cost are often tied together. Early humans did not live long enough, often enough, under safe enough conditions for every late cost to be removed. Some costs could remain in the shadow, beyond the most dangerous years. Yet humans complicate this picture. Older people were not useless shadows at the edge of the group. They could remember drought, migration, safe plants, dangerous animals, family bonds, tool methods, and the behavior of children. Their presence may have helped younger lives survive, so selection in later life did not simply vanish. It may have continued through care, knowledge, and kin. But even with that human difference, the pressure against late biological harm was not the same as the pressure against early failure. The body was shaped most urgently around the need to reach maturity, reproduce, protect the young, and support the group. Later life could hold meaning, but meaning is not the same as perfect biological protection. This is where the mystery becomes quietly human. We are not bodies designed by a perfect plan for every decade equally. We are bodies shaped by uneven time. Some protections are strongest near the beginning. Some costs wait until later. Some early gifts carry late shadows. And in the long distance between ancient survival and modern old age, those shadows become visible as the aging process. The weakening force of selection with age does not mean the later body was forgotten. It means the later body stood in a different light. Earlier life was watched by sharper consequences. A child who could not survive infection, cold, hunger, or injury would not become an adult. A young adult who could not recover, find food, reproduce, or help care for children might leave fewer traces in the future. But a biological cost that waited until later years could pass through the early gates unnoticed. It could travel quietly inside families and populations, because for much of human history, many bodies had already done the most urgent work of continuation before that cost fully appeared. This idea helps explain why aging can be so deeply rooted and yet so uneven. The body may carry late weaknesses not because they were useful, but because they were not strongly exposed when natural selection was most forceful. In ancient human life, this would not have been visible as a theory. It would have appeared as difference among people. One older person might remain strong enough to walk far and guide others through a difficult season. Another might suffer from old injuries, failing teeth, weaker sight, or a body that did not recover well after illness. A third might carry sharp memory, but slower movement. The group would not have seen genes or late-acting mutations. It would have seen bodies shaped by time, chance, food, wounds, childbirth, work, care, and inheritance. Some people reached later life with resilience. Others reached it carrying heavier costs. Aging was therefore never one simple road. It was a landscape of many paths, each beginning in the same ancient pressure: survive early enough for life to continue. There is a quiet historical mystery here. Human beings are one of the few creatures whose later life may have mattered strongly through memory and care. An older adult could know when certain plants returned, where water remained in dry months, how to calm a child, how to make a tool, how to read tracks, how to remember a place after years away. This means the later human body was not irrelevant. It could still affect the survival of younger people. A grandmother, grandfather, elder sibling, or older relative might help children live, and this could have shaped human life in ways still studied today. But value to the group does not require the body to remain biologically untouched. The older person could be useful and still age. They could carry knowledge and still lose speed. They could protect memory, while their tissues slowly lost some of the repair power of youth. This is why the human story is more complex than saying, selection simply ends after reproduction. It does not end in any clean way. It softens, shifts, and changes its route through kin, care, and culture. The body, however, still carries delayed costs that earlier life did not fully remove. To understand this, imagine time not as a straight line, but as a series of doors. The first door is birth. The next is childhood. Then come learning, strength, fertility, parenting, protection, and social belonging. A body that passes through these doors may carry hidden problems that do not appear until later rooms. By the time those problems become visible, the body may already have helped life continue. In the old environments where humans began, that was often enough for a trait to remain. Later harm could be real, painful, and meaningful to the person who felt it, yet still weakly filtered by evolution compared with early harm. This is one of the coldest truths in the evolution of aging. The body is shaped by consequences, not by fairness. It does not receive equal protection for every year simply because every year feels equally important from the inside. From inside one life, the final decades are not distant or secondary. They are full of memory, fear, love, dignity, and loss. But from the long movement of generations, early survival often carried the loudest signal. Aging may have evolved partly in that difference between personal time and evolutionary time. We live as single bodies, hoping to remain whole. Evolution moves through many bodies, keeping what allowed the chain to continue. In that gap, late weaknesses can survive. Early strengths can leave later shadows. The aging process begins to look less like an accident and more like a trace of uneven protection across the human lifespan. The young body was guarded fiercely because the future depended on it. The older body was still meaningful, sometimes deeply so, but it carried costs that the ancient world did not always remove before they became part of us. A young body often survives by reacting strongly. It grows quickly when food allows. It builds muscle after work. It heals wounds with urgency. It raises inflammation when infection appears. It releases hormones that help the body mature, compete, desire, reproduce, carry children, and recover from stress. These forces can feel like signs of health, and in many ways they are. Without them, the body would not reach adulthood, defend itself, or take its place inside the long chain of human life. But the same forces that protect early life may not remain harmless forever. A signal that is useful when the body is young can become costly when it continues too long, burns too strongly, or meets tissues already marked by time. This is one of the strangest ideas in the evolution of aging. The young body may be protected by mechanisms that later become part of its burden. In the deep past, the value of these early strengths would have been clear. A child needed growth. A young adult needed power, fertility, alertness, social drive, and the ability to recover after ordinary injury. A body that failed to grow, failed to fight infection, failed to store energy, or failed to reproduce would often leave fewer traces in the future. So natural selection could favour strong early effects, even if some of those effects carried later costs. The ancient world did not wait patiently for a body to preserve itself for old age. It asked whether the body could survive hunger now, infection now, cold now, childbirth now, danger now, and the long dependence of children now. The young body answered with intensity. That intensity helped life continue, but intensity is not the same as timeless balance. Take inflammation as a simple example, without turning it into the whole answer. Inflammation is not an enemy by itself. It is one of the body's ancient defenses. When a wound opens, when bacteria enter, when tissue is damaged, the immune system must act quickly. In a world without antibiotics or sterile rooms, a strong response could mean the difference between life and death. For early humans, a thorn, a bite, a cut from stone, a burn from fire, or an infected tooth could become dangerous. A body that reacted weakly might not survive. But a defensive fire that once saved tissue can become harmful if it never fully settles, or if age makes regulation less precise. Later in life, the same protective system may contribute to wear in quieter ways. The ancient gift becomes a later cost, not because the body was foolish, but because the meaning of a response changes with time. Growth carries a similar tension. The young body must build itself. Bones lengthen, muscles strengthen, sexual maturity arrives, and the brain continues to organize experience into memory and judgment. Growth signals are part of this becoming. They help the body move from helpless infancy into adult capability. In early human life, this mattered greatly. A body had to become strong enough to walk far, gather food, make tools, endure weather, and participate in the group. Yet growth and repair both require cell activity, and cell activity must be controlled with great care. A body that pushes growth powerfully early may receive benefits when it most needs them, while later life may carry risks from systems that are harder to regulate after decades of use. Again, this is not a single cause of aging. It is a pattern of trade. What is good at one age may not be equally good at another. Even stress responses show this double face. Fear, alertness, and quick reaction helped ancient humans stay alive. A person who heard movement in the dark, woke quickly, and prepared to respond may have survived dangers another person missed. A body that could release energy fast during threat had an advantage in a landscape where predators, conflicts, storms, and accidents were real. But a body cannot live forever in emergency. Systems designed for short danger may strain the body if they are activated too often, or if modern life keeps them awake in new ways. The old human body was shaped for moments of danger, recovery, rest, hunger, movement, and social safety, not for endless tension without release. Here, the aging process begins to look like a series of late shadows cast by early light. The body's strongest protections were not designed with equal concern for every decade. They were shaped where survival was most urgent. The young body needed force. The older body needed regulation, repair, quiet balance, and reserve. But the same biology had to serve both. In that shared design, youth could receive gifts that age would later have to pay for. The mystery is not why the body has defenses. The mystery is why defenses that once protected the beginning of life could not remain perfectly gentle through the whole journey. Somewhere in that question, the ancient human body appears again, powerful enough to survive, but never free from the cost of its own survival. A young body often lives on borrowed intensity. It can grow fast, heal fast, desire strongly, wake quickly, and answer danger before thought has fully formed. In early life, this intensity is not wasteful. It is protection. A child must become large enough to survive. An adolescent body must learn its strength. A young adult must move through uncertainty with energy, fertility, courage, and recovery. In the ancient landscapes where human life began, a body that responded too slowly could lose its chance before wisdom had time to arrive. The body had to be sharp before it could be old. It had to be strong before it could be careful. It had to reach the years when children, knowledge, and social bonds could carry life forward. But intensity has a memory. A system that burns brightly in youth may leave heat behind. The same biology that helps the young body survive can become harder to regulate after years of use, repair, stress, hunger, injury, and reproduction. This is why aging is not only a story of things wearing out. It is also a story of helpful forces changing meaning over time. Consider the immune system again, not as a villain, but as one of the oldest guardians of the body. In the world before medicine, infection was not a small inconvenience. A cut from stone, a bite, a thorn, a burn, or a wound from daily work could open the body to danger. The immune system had to react with speed and force. Redness, heat, swelling, fever, and fatigue were not random suffering. They were part of the body's defense, a way of pulling energy into the struggle. For a young person trying to survive in a small group, this response could be precious. It could close the door before infection spread too far. Yet a defense that saves life in the short term can become costly if it lingers in the background. Later in life, when tissues are already marked by time and repair is less smooth, the immune system may not return to perfect quiet so easily. The old fire that once guarded the wound can become part of the slow warmth of decline. Growth and strength also carry this double meaning. The human body must build itself with urgency. It must turn food into bone, muscle, blood, skin, and brain. It must mature sexually. It must become capable of carrying weight, walking far, making tools, lifting children, enduring cold, and recovering from the strain of ordinary life. In the deep past, a weakly built young body faced real danger. Strength was not for display. It was tied to food, shelter, movement, and care. But the signals that help growth and repair early in life must be controlled carefully across decades. Cells need permission to divide, but not too much. Tissues need rebuilding, but not careless growth. Hormones need to support fertility and strength. But the body changes as years pass. What once helped the beginning of life may become less balanced in the later body. The same road that carried a person forward can become rough under older feet. Even the stress response, so useful in immediate danger, has a late shadow. A human body needed fear. It needed alertness in darkness, caution near strange sounds, quick energy during threat, and the ability to stay awake when a child cried or a predator moved near camp. The nervous system was shaped in a world where attention could save life. Yet the body was also shaped to return to calm, to sleep near others, to rest after danger, to recover beside fire, voice, touch, and group safety. When stress becomes repeated, or when danger is carried inside the mind long after the body is safe, the ancient system may remain active beyond its original purpose. This is not only a modern problem, but modern life can make it more visible. We still carry a body built for sudden threats, physical recovery, and social reassurance, while many pressures now arrive as noise, worry, memory, isolation, and long tension without movement. In that meeting between an ancient body and a new world, old protective systems can become heavy. Aging may therefore contain a strange inheritance. Some of what protects us early also burdens us later. The body is not betrayed by useless parts. It is shaped by parts that were useful in a different moment of life. The young body needed force, but the older body needs balance. The young body needed quick repair, but the older body needs clean repair. The young body needed strong defense, but the older body needs defense that knows when to stop. The difficulty is that one body must carry all ages inside the same design. It must begin with urgency, live through danger, give energy to others, and then ask for gentleness from systems built for survival. Somewhere inside this change of meaning, the aging process becomes less like a simple breakdown and more like the late price of early protection. The late cost of early protection is not easy to feel because youth does not usually experience itself as a bargain. A young body feels direct. It feels hunger and eats, feels danger and wakes, feels injury and heals, feels desire and moves toward another person, feels strength and uses it. The cost is often invisible because the cost has not yet arrived. In the ancient world, this made sense. A body near the beginning of adulthood could not afford to think like an old body. It had to answer the present. It had to cross ground, lift, carry, defend, mate, give birth, nurse, gather, hunt, and remain alert to weather, animals, fire, and other people. If inflammation rose to defend a wound, the body did not ask what that fire might mean decades later. If growth signals helped build bone and muscle, the body did not ask how those signals might behave after many years. If stress sharpened hearing in the dark, the body did not ask whether repeated alarm would one day make rest more difficult. The young body lived inside urgency, and urgency shaped many of the systems we still carry. But later life asks a different question. It asks not only whether the body can react, but whether it can return to quiet. It asks whether inflammation can stop after danger is gone. It asks whether cells can repair without losing order. It asks whether hormones can shift without disturbing the whole balance. It asks whether the nervous system can rest after years of responding. This is where aging begins to show the difficulty of using one biological design for an entire lifetime. The same body has to be a child, a young adult, a parent, a worker, a keeper of memory, and an older person. It cannot trade itself for a new design at each age. It carries forward the tools that helped it earlier, even when those tools need gentler handling later. In the beginning of human history, this continuity was both useful and costly. The body that could produce a strong fever might survive an infection that would kill another. The body that could store energy might endure a lean season. The body that could remain alert at night might hear danger near the camp. The body that could grow quickly when food returned might recover from scarcity. These were not small advantages. They were part of survival before cities, before medicine, before written memory, before safe water and stored abundance became normal for many people. Yet the same traits could leave shadows. Strong defense could become lingering disturbance. Energy storage could become a mismatch in a different environment. Alertness could become restlessness when danger was no longer immediate. Growth and repair could become harder to regulate after tissues had aged. None of this means the body was badly made. It means the body was made through time, and time changes the meaning of every system. A stone tool that is useful for cutting hide may become dangerous if pressed against skin. Fire that warms a child may fill a shelter with smoke if it cannot breathe. A path that saves distance may wear deep into the earth after many feet have used it. The body is similar. Its ancient protections were shaped for use, not for perfect innocence. They helped humans live long enough to build memory, family, skill, and culture, but they did not remove every cost from the future. This is why aging feels so personal and yet so ancient. When a person feels slower recovery, weaker sleep, heavier joints, or a body that reacts too easily and calms too slowly, they are not only feeling private decline, they may be feeling the old tension between defense and peace, between growth and control, between urgency and maintenance, between early life and later balance. The first humans lived this tension without naming it. They saw it in bodies around the fire, in elders who knew much but moved carefully, in adults who carried children despite pain, in faces changed by weather and years, in hands still useful though no longer young. The young body had once protected the group by being strong, fast, fertile, and reactive. The older body protected the group differently, through knowledge, patience, memory, and care. But the tissue remained the same tissue, carrying earlier battles into later silence. So the question deepens. Aging may not come only from what the body failed to do. It may also come from what the body once did very well. The systems that saved life in the dangerous beginning could not always become perfectly harmless in the quieter distance. In that late shadow of early protection, we see a colder and more human possibility. The body grows old partly because it was once built to survive so urgently. By the time a human body reached later life in the ancient world, it was not only an older body. It was a body that had become part of the memory of a group. Around a fire, near a shelter, beside a river, or on the edge of a cold plain, age could mean more than decline. It could mean remembered paths, known plants, dangerous crossings, old animal movements, seasons that had failed before, and the quiet knowledge of how fear changes when night comes. This does not remove the cost of aging. The knees might ache, the eyes might weaken, the teeth might be worn, the body might need more rest after hunger, cold, or walking. But inside a small human group, an older person was not only a weaker version of a younger one, they could become a living store of what the group had already survived. This is where aging enters the campfire world, not as a medical problem but as a human presence beside other bodies. In many animals, later life may have less social meaning once reproduction slows. Humans are different because survival has never depended only on muscle. It has depended on learning. A child is born unfinished, needing years of carrying, feeding, watching, teaching, and protection. A young adult may have strength, but strength without memory can be dangerous. Where is water after a dry season? Which route is safe only after preparation? Which valley floods suddenly? Which animal should not be followed too far? Which wound needs rest? Which child is strong enough to walk, and which must be carried? These questions belong to the older human world, where knowledge could mean survival. A body that had lived long enough to hold such knowledge could matter even while its tissues aged. This makes the evolution of aging more complicated than a simple story of decline after reproduction. The older body might still influence the future through care, warning, memory, and guidance. Yet the body still paid its biological price. The same person who remembered a water source might not be able to reach it quickly. The same hands that knew how to shape a tool might tremble more than before. The same mind that carried stories might need quiet to bring them back. Aging did not erase usefulness, but usefulness did not erase aging. Human life grew in the tension between these two truths. In the beginning of our species, a group did not survive by replacing every aging body with a young one. It survived by overlapping ages. Children brought the future, young adults brought force, parents brought care, and older people, when they were present, brought time itself. They were not perfect libraries. They were fragile, breathing bodies, sometimes strong, sometimes limited, sometimes dependent, sometimes deeply needed. Around the fire, this overlap may have mattered. Fire extended the day, softened food, warmed children, frightened some animals, and created a place where memory could be spoken. In such spaces, age could turn experience into shared knowledge. An older person did not need to run faster than the young to help them survive. They might only need to remember what the young had never seen. This does not mean aging evolved because elders were useful. That would be too simple and too certain. But it does mean that in humans, later life cannot be understood only through weakening tissue. It must also be seen through the social world that surrounded the tissue. The body aged inside relationships. It aged while holding babies, warning children, sorting food, tending fire, watching weather, and carrying stories of places no longer visible. The ancient camp was not a place where biology ended and culture began. It was where biology and culture held each other. A slower body could still protect a faster one through memory. A younger body could still protect an older one through strength. Each generation made the other less alone. This is why aging in humans feels different from simple decay. It happens in flesh, but it reaches into the group. It weakens some abilities while preserving others long enough to matter. It shows that the aging process did not unfold in isolation, but inside the first human circles of warmth, food, danger, care, and remembered time. An older person beside a fire could hold two kinds of truth at once. The body might be less able to run, lift, climb, or heal with the speed of youth, yet the mind might carry maps that no younger person possessed. A valley could be remembered not as a place, but as a season. A tree could be remembered not only for fruit, but for the time of year when its fruit would appear. A stretch of ground could be remembered because someone once slipped there after rain. A certain animal trail could be understood because it had changed before. A plant could be avoided because an older mouth had tasted danger long ago. In a small ancient group, knowledge was not stored in books, walls, or carved signs. It was stored in living people. So, when a body aged, the group did not only see decline, it could also see accumulated time made useful. This is important because humans did not survive only by being strong. They survived by making strength teachable. A young adult might have fast legs and powerful hands, but fast legs do not know where to go by themselves. Powerful hands do not know which stone will break cleanly, which root must be cooked, which water may be unsafe, or when the weather has begun to change in a familiar way. The deep beginning of human life was full of repeated patterns that only time could reveal. Rains returned, animals migrated, plants ripened, infants cried, wounds healed or worsened, cold entered the night, and groups moved through remembered places. An older person who had survived many of these cycles could help transform experience into guidance. The aging body, then, stood near a strange border. It lost some immediacy, but gained a long view. It could no longer always answer danger with speed, yet it might answer uncertainty with memory. This does not make aging gentle. A worn tooth still hurts. Weak sight still limits the world. A stiff joint still makes ground harder. A slower immune response can still make illness frightening. But human aging happened inside relationships that could give later life another kind of meaning. The older person might care for children while younger adults search for food. They might teach the shaping of tools, the preparation of plants, the reading of tracts, the quiet rules of sharing, or the stories that held a group together. Even a person who could no longer travel far might become part of the sheltering circle around the young. In this way, the body's later years could still reach forward, not through new birth alone, but through helping the already born remain alive. This is one reason the evolution of aging in humans cannot be understood only through biology inside the skin. Human bodies aged inside a social species. A weakness in one body could be softened by the strength of another. A memory in one mind could protect many bodies. A child's survival might depend not only on the mother, but on siblings, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, uncles, aunts, and other trusted members of the group. The human body evolved in a world where care was spread across more than one person. That does not mean every ancient group was kind, peaceful, or perfectly cooperative. Human life has always contained conflict, loss, and uncertainty. But the long dependence of children made cooperation unusually important. A child who needed years of food, teaching, and protection created a world where older knowledge could matter. Around fires, in shelters, near caves, in open camps, and along river paths, survival was carried by overlapping generations. This overlap may help explain why humans can live beyond the years of direct reproduction in a way that feels biologically and culturally meaningful. It does not solve the whole mystery of aging. It does not prove that aging evolved in order to create elders. That would be too direct. But it shows that later life was not empty in the human story. The aging process unfolded in bodies that could still influence descendants, shape memory, and hold the group's past close enough to guide its future. The body may have lost some strength with age, but it could become a vessel of remembered survival. And in the first human circles, where no written record existed, remembered survival may have been one of the most valuable things a body could carry. The campfire world gives aging a human shape that a cell alone cannot show. A body grows old inside tissue, but it is seen, understood, and carried inside a group. An older person who could no longer move with the same speed might still know the timing of a dry season, the safer side of a river crossing, the sound of weather changing at night, or the behavior of animals before a hard winter. Their value was not separate from the body, but it was not measured only by muscle. In the long beginning of human life, survival depended on more than immediate strength. It depended on remembering what had happened before. A young body could bring force to the present, but an older body could bring the past into the present. That difference may have mattered more for humans than for many other animals, because human survival became deeply tied to learning, teaching, language, tools, fire, and long childhood. A child needed years before it could feed itself well, protect itself, understand danger, and join the work of the group. During those years, every extra hand, every careful eye, and every remembered warning could change the future. This is why the older human body cannot be reduced to decline. It may have lost some speed, but it could help preserve the slow knowledge that made the group less blind. Still, the story must remain honest. Not every older person in the deep past would have been protected or valued in the same way. Some groups may have cared deeply for those who aged. Others, under hunger or danger, may have struggled to carry everyone. Injury, sickness, tooth loss, blindness, or weakness could make life very hard. The ancient world was not a soft place simply because people lived together, yet the existence of care in human evolution matters. Archaeological evidence from ancient remains sometimes shows individuals who lived with injury, disability, or severe wear long enough to suggest help from others. These traces are not always easy to interpret, but they remind us that human bodies did not age alone in a purely mechanical world. They aged among other bodies that might feed, protect, listen, remember, and depend on them. Around fire, aging could become part of a shared rhythm. The young might gather wood, carry water, or move quickly across ground. The older might prepare food, watch children, shape small tools, remember stories, or warn against a mistake made long ago. The body's decline in one ability could be balanced by another person's strength. The group became a second kind of body, wider than skin. This does not stop aging, but it changes what aging means. It means later life could still be woven into survival, even when the individual body was losing some of its earlier reserves. Here, the question of why aging evolved becomes larger than the question of why cells fail to repair perfectly. It becomes a question about why humans became a species in which time could be shared. The older person carried personal damage, but also collective memory. The young person carried future strength, but needed guidance. A child carried possibility, but needed years of protection. The aging process unfolded inside this web. It was not simply a private biological countdown. It was part of a living arrangement in which different ages gave different things. That arrangement did not make the body immortal. It may have made a finite body more useful for longer than strength alone would allow. In the first human circles, this may have been one of the quiet differences between mere survival and human survival. The body could age, but memory could still move outward. The knees might slow, but the warning could travel. The eyes might weaken, but the story could remain. The hand might tremble, but the child could still learn from it. Aging, seen beside the ancient fire, becomes less like a simple fall from youth and more like a change in the way a body belongs to others. The mystery remains open because usefulness in later life does not explain every cellular cost, every late weakness, or every slow failure of repair, but it gives the question a warmer edge. If the body was shaped in groups, then aging was also shaped in the presence of care, memory, dependence, and teaching. The older body carried the marks of time, but it also helped time become knowledge. And before writing, before history, before civilization, that may have been one of the first ways human beings learned to survive beyond the limits of a single body. One of the strangest things about human aging is that later life may have carried value long after direct reproduction had, slowed or ended. In many species, the main biological story is tightly tied to producing offspring, and once that work is finished, later life may be short or less socially central. Humans do not fit that simple shape. A human child is born helpless for a very long time. It needs warmth, milk, touch, protection, teaching, language, patience, and food that others must find, prepare, and share. A young mother alone would have carried an enormous burden in the deep past. A father, siblings, relatives, and trusted adults could all matter, but among these helpers, older women may have held a special place in the human story. They could no longer bear children after menopause, yet they could still help existing children and grandchildren survive. This possibility is often called the grandmother hypothesis, and it does not give a final answer to aging. It opens a careful question. Could life after reproduction have mattered because an older body helped younger bodies live? To feel why this idea matters, we have to return again to the first human environments. Food did not arrive in a straight line. A child needed calories every day, but the land gave food through seasons, skills, memory, and luck. Roots had to be dug, nuts had to be cracked, shellfish had to be found, small animals had to be caught. Plant foods had to be recognized, carried, sometimes cooked, sometimes avoided. A young child could not do this alone. A mother nursing one child or carrying another could not always gather enough without help. In such a world, an experienced older woman who knew where food could be found, how to process it, and how to keep children safe might increase the chances that grandchildren survived. Her body might no longer be young, but her time could still become nourishment. Her memory could become food. Her presence could become protection. This is not a romantic picture of the past. It is a biological and social possibility rooted in the unusual shape of human life. Humans have long childhoods, high learning demands, and social dependence. A child does not simply need to be born. A child needs to be raised into a world of tools, fire, speech, food rules, danger signs, kin bonds, and group behavior. If an older person helped carry that burden, then later life could affect the future even without producing new children directly. This matters for the question of why aging evolved, because it shows that the later body was not invisible to evolution. The older body might still influence which children lived, which knowledge survived, and which families endured hard seasons. Yet this does not mean the body was protected perfectly in later life. The grandmother may have been useful, but her joints still aged. Her teeth still wore down. Her immune system still changed. Her strength still had limits. Value and vulnerability lived together in the same body. The grandmother hypothesis is powerful because it gives later life a possible evolutionary role, but it must be spoken softly. It is not the only explanation for human longevity. It does not explain all of aging. It does not mean every older woman in the past lived safely or was always valued. It does not mean men, grandfathers, or other older helpers were unimportant. Human groups were varied, and ancient lives cannot be reduced to one clean pattern. But the idea helps us see something essential. Human aging unfolded in a species where care extended beyond birth, beyond parents, and sometimes beyond reproduction itself. Around the ancient fire, an older woman could sit near children while younger adults searched for food. She could recognize edible plants, soften tough foods, soothe fear, pass on rules, warn against danger, and remember a season of hunger that the young had never lived through. Her body might show the marks of time, but those marks came with stored knowledge. In this way, later life may have become part of a larger human strategy. Not endless youth, not perfect repair, but overlapping generations that allowed children to survive a difficult world. The mystery becomes deeper, not simpler. If older bodies helped the young, why did they still decline? If memory mattered, why did the body not preserve itself more fully? The answer is not here yet, but the question has changed. Aging is no longer only the fading of one body. It is also the strange place where weakness, memory, care, and the future of children meet. The grandmother hypothesis opens a quiet door into the human past, but it also makes the mystery of aging more delicate. It suggests that a body may continue to matter after its own reproduction slows, because that body can still help descendants survive. Yet this does not mean later life was easy, protected, or free from biological cost. An older woman who helped feed grandchildren still had to live inside an aging body. She still needed food, warmth, rest, and protection. She still carried old injuries, worn teeth, changing eyesight, and slower recovery. Her usefulness did not cancel her vulnerability. This is one of the most human tensions in the evolution of aging. Later life could be valuable, yet still physically fragile. A person could become more important to memory while becoming less strong in muscle. They could hold knowledge that shaped the future, while their own body carried the marks of time. In the beginning of human life, this tension would have been present in the ordinary tasks of survival. A grandmother might know where underground storage organs could be dug during a dry season. She might know which foods were safe for children, which plants needed fire, which shells could be opened, which stories warned against dangerous places. She might sit near the young while others travelled farther. She might share softened food with a child whose teeth were not ready for tougher meals. She might recognize the signs of sickness before a young parent did. These acts are small, only from a distance. In a world without written instructions, without stores of baby food, without clinics, without guaranteed shelter, such acts could shape whether a child lived through another season. Human survival was not only the survival of isolated adults, it was the survival of dependent children inside networks of care. That is why later life may have mattered in a special way for humans. A body past reproduction could still become part of reproduction's success, because human children required long protection after birth. The child's future did not depend only on being born. It depended on food gathered by others, danger noticed by others, fire kept by others, and knowledge remembered by others. In this sense, the older body could help carry life without producing a new life directly. It could turn memory into survival. But this idea must remain careful. It does not prove that aging exists because elders were helpful. Aging is older and broader than humanity. Many species age. Many species show decline without a human-like social world. The grandmother hypothesis belongs to one question inside a larger question. Why humans can have meaningful life after reproduction, and how that later life may have shaped our unusual lifespan. It does not explain all cellular damage, all late disease, all weakening repair, or all differences between individuals. It gives us a human layer, not a total answer. The body still aged because cells still carried damage, tissues still needed energy, immune systems still changed, and natural selection still acted unevenly across the lifespan. What the hypothesis adds is the possibility that older human bodies were not simply left outside the story, they may have helped build the story from within. Around a fire, the value of an older person may not have been measured by speed. It may have been measured by whether a child was fed, whether a mother rested, whether a dangerous plant was avoided, whether a difficult season was remembered correctly. The body could lose force while gaining a different kind of reach. It could reach into the future through grandchildren, nieces, nephews, younger relatives, and the shared children of the group. This is where aging becomes deeply tied to time. The young body carries tomorrow through strength. The older body may carry tomorrow through memory. Both are needed, but neither is complete alone. In the ancient human world, generations overlapped like layers of shelter. The infant needed the adult. The adult needed the knowledge of those who had lived longer. The older person needed the strength and care of the young. Aging unfolded within this exchange, not outside it. The mystery remains open because the body did not solve the problem perfectly. It allowed memory to last longer than peak strength, but it did not preserve memory, strength, and repair without limit. It made later life possible enough to matter, but not safe enough to remain untouched. That quiet imbalance may be one of the reasons human aging feels so powerful. It is not only decline, and it is not only wisdom. It is the meeting place between a body that is fading and a future that still needs what that body remembers. The idea of grandparents, memory, and later life brings us close to one of the most important differences in the human story. Humans do not simply live, they inherit. A child inherits genes, but also warmth, food, language, names, warnings, gestures, habits, tools, fire, and stories about places the child has not yet understood. Much of this inheritance passes through older bodies. Before writing, before schools, before maps, before calendars, time itself had to be held by living people. Someone had to remember when the river changed. Someone had to remember which season brought certain animals. Someone had to remember that a plant could feed the group if prepared carefully, or harm a child if eaten raw. Someone had to remember where a family once found shelter when wind crossed the open ground. In a species like ours, memory became part of survival, and older people could become vessels of that memory. This does not make aging beautiful in a simple way. The older body still carried pain, weakness, tooth wear, injury, and the slower return from illness. But it means that later life was not only a fading away from usefulness. It could become a different form of usefulness, quieter than strength, but sometimes just as important. This is why human aging cannot be understood only by looking at the body's decline. It must also be understood by looking at the way humans became dependent on shared knowledge. A young animal may survive mostly through instinct and quick learning. A human child must be taught deeply. It must learn what food is safe, how fire behaves, how tools are made, how the group speaks, how danger is recognized, how anger is calmed, how care is given, and how the dead are remembered. These things take time. They require overlapping generations. If everybody disappeared soon after reproduction, much knowledge would vanish with it. Longer life allowed memory to stretch beyond the immediate parents, into grandparents and elders, into people who had seen rare events before. In a harsh world, rare events mattered. A drought might not come every year. A dangerous migration route might only be remembered by someone old enough to have crossed it before. A cold season might test knowledge that had slept quietly for years. Later life could preserve these slow lessons, yet the body that preserved them was still made of aging tissue. This is the central tension. Evolution may have allowed humans to benefit from later life, but it did not turn later life into permanent youth. Memory could last longer than speed. Care could last longer than fertility. Teaching could last longer than peak strength. But none of these later gifts required the body to remain unchanged forever. They only required the body to remain present enough, aware enough, connected enough, and useful enough for knowledge to move from one generation into another. Around the ancient fire, this may have been enough. An older person did not need to chase every animal, carry every load, or walk every mile to change the survival of the group. A warning could save effort. A remembered food source could reduce hunger. A calming presence could help a child sleep. A story could hold together a group that needed trust. In this way, the older body could influence the future through other bodies. That influence may help explain why human later life became meaningful, but it does not erase the deeper biological question. Why did the body preserve memory and care longer than it preserved full physical strength? Why did it allow years after reproduction, but still let repair weaken? Why did it extend the human story, yet keep each human body finite? The answer cannot be reduced to one hypothesis. Grandmothers, grandfathers, elders, helpers, and memory may all be part of the story, but aging also belongs to cells, energy, selection, damage, and chance. What becomes clear is that human aging evolved in a species where time was shared. A single body could grow old, but the knowledge inside that body could move onward. A hand could weaken, but the skill of that hand could be taught. A voice could soften, but the warning in that voice could remain. Before civilization built monuments, the first human monument was living memory. And perhaps this is why aging feels so different in humans. It is the slow decline of one body inside the continuing life of others. Human aging becomes easier to see when we place it beside the lives of other animals. A mouse may grow quickly, reproduce early, and live a short life. An elephant may grow slowly, Mikaboli, and live for many decades. A small bird may outlive a mammal of similar size. Some whales carry time across oceans for longer than many human lives. Some reptiles and fish show patterns of aging that seem slower or less familiar to us. Nature does not use one clock for every living body. Aging is not a single speed placed over all life. It changes with body size, danger, reproduction, metabolism, repair, social life, and the environment in which a species became itself. This matters for the human story because it reminds us that aging did not evolve as one universal mistake. It took different shapes in different creatures depending on what life demanded from them. The human body belongs to one particular path, a large-brained, social, slow-growing primate body, born helpless, dependent for years, shaped by learning, cooperation, movement, fire, tools, and memory. To understand why the aging process evolved in humans, we have to notice how unusual that path is. A mouse lives under heavy danger. It is small, hunted by many animals, and its life strategy favors speed. Grow quickly, reproduce quickly, pass life onward before the world removes the body. In such a life, strong long-term maintenance may be less favored because the outside world often ends the body before late repair would matter. An elephant lives under different pressure. Its size protects it from many predators once it is grown. It matures slowly, invests heavily in offspring, lives socially, and carries memory across long landscapes. A whale may move through a world where size, intelligence, social bonds, and slow reproduction create another rhythm of life. These animals are not better or worse. They reveal that aging is tied to strategy. A body's lifespan is shaped by the kind of risks it faces and the kind of future it must protect. Humans stand somewhere strange within this pattern. We are not as small and fast-lived as mice, not as massive as elephants, not as oceanic as whales. We are primates with long childhoods, flexible hands, large brains, language, shared food, fire, tools, and an unusual dependence on culture. Our ancestors did not survive mainly through armor, claws, speed, or size. They survived through groups, memory, skill, care, and the ability to change behavior across environments. This gave the human body reasons to last long enough for learning and teaching to matter. A child needed many years before becoming fully capable. A young adult needed time to master tools, food, social rules, danger, and care. Older people, when they survived, could hold knowledge that helped the group. These pressures may have supported longer life than in many shorter-lived animals. Yet they did not create immortality. The human body still had to pay the costs of repair, reproduction, immune defense, movement, and cellular maintenance. It gained time, but not endless time. This comparison with other animals helps protect us from a simple misunderstanding. If aging exists in many forms across life, then human aging is not only the story of modern disease, modern comfort, or modern weakness. It is older than civilization. It belongs to the long history of living bodies trying to match their environments. A bird that flies must solve different problems from a human who walks. A turtle protected by a shell solves different problems from a child protected by adults. A whale protected by size solves different problems from a small group protected by fire, memory, and cooperation. Each body carries a different agreement with time. The human agreement was especially delicate. We needed enough longevity for childhood, teaching, social bonds, and accumulated knowledge, but we still inherited tissues that wear, cells that need repair, and systems that change with age. This is why comparing humans to other animals does not give one clean answer. It widens the question. It shows that aging is not simply a countdown. It is a pattern shaped by danger, protection, reproduction, and the way a species continues. In the beginning of human life, the body was not trying to become the longest-lived creature on Earth. It was trying to become human, social, teachable, adaptable, caring, and able to carry memory across generations. That path gave us long lives compared with many animals, but it also left us with the quiet limit every body must face. We age in a human way because our bodies were shaped for a human kind of survival. Different animals teach us that aging is shaped by the bargain each species makes with danger. A creature that is hunted from every side often lives under a short clock. It may grow quickly, reproduce early, and place less emphasis on long repair because the outside world may end its life before old age becomes common. A creature protected by size, shell, flight, poison, deep water, social defense, or intelligence may live under a slower clock. If the world gives the body a better chance of reaching later years, then stronger maintenance can matter more. This is one reason large animals often live longer than small ones, though there are many exceptions. It is also why birds can surprise us, why bats can live longer than many mammals of similar size, and why whales and elephants make human aging feel like only one version of a much wider story. Aging is not a single law falling evenly over all creatures. It is shaped by how each body meets risk, how quickly it reproduces, how much it invests in the young, and how long knowledge or care can influence survival. Humans came from a very unusual path inside this wider pattern. We were not protected by heavy armor. We were not born with claws strong enough to make us safe. We were not the fastest animal on open ground. Our infants were not ready to run after birth. In many ways, the human body seems exposed. A newborn cannot survive alone. A child needs years before it can feed itself well. Even an adult human, without tools, fire, knowledge, and a group, is vulnerable to cold, hunger, injury, infection, and other animals. Yet humans became long-lived compared with many mammals of similar size. The reason is not one simple trait. It was the whole human arrangement: large brains, hands, teaching, cooperation, fire, shared food, long childhood, social memory, and the ability to live in many environments. This arrangement changed the meaning of time. A longer life could be useful because learning took so long. A longer childhood could be possible because adults and older helpers shared the burden. A longer adulthood could allow skill, care, and memory to grow. In the deep beginning of human life, a person did not become useful only by being young and strong. They became useful by learning how to be human in a difficult world. That learning required years. It required watching how stone breaks, how fire behaves, how children are soothed, how animals move, how plants change, how storms build, how wounds are treated, and how people live together without destroying the group. A short-lived creature with a simpler strategy does not need the same amount of accumulated knowledge. Humans did. This may help explain why the human body was not shaped for an extremely short life. It needed enough time for culture to work through biology. The body had to last long enough for experience to become skill, and for skill to become teaching. Still, this longer life came with the same deep problem that all living bodies face. More years mean more time for damage to gather. More memory means more tissue to maintain. More care means more energy spent on others. More social life means more stress, more protection, more conflict, more healing, and more dependence. A human body was built for a slow strategy compared with many animals, but slow does not mean endless. It only means that survival unfolded across a longer arc. Our ancestors gained time because time itself became useful. Time allowed children to mature, adults to learn, older people to remember, and groups to carry knowledge beyond one body. Yet the tissues that carried this longer arc still had limits. Bones still wore, teeth still broke, cells still repaired imperfectly, the immune system still changed, the brain still needed sleep, blood, energy, and protection. Comparing humans with other animals shows a quiet truth. Longer life is not freedom from aging. Often, it is a larger stage on which aging can appear more fully. The mouse may burn quickly and vanish sooner. The elephant may carry decades of memory and still grow old. The whale may cross oceans for many years and still face time in its own way. The human may speak, remember, teach, love, and build, yet still carry the body of an animal shaped by energy, risk, reproduction, and repair. So when we ask why the aging process evolved, we are also asking why our species received a longer road, but not a road without an end. Human aging belongs to that road. Long enough for memory, care, and culture to matter, but still made from living tissue that cannot remain untouched forever. The comparison with other animals helps us see human aging without making humans the center of all life. We are one species among many, and every species has found its own fragile way of staying alive for long enough. Some live fast and disappear quickly. Some live slowly and carry time for decades or centuries. Some protect themselves with shells, some with flight, some with venom, some with size, some with numbers, some with social bonds. Humans protected themselves with something different, shared knowledge carried by vulnerable bodies, That difference gave our aging a special shape. We are not the longest lived animal, we are not the strongest, we are not the most physically protected, but we became a species in which a longer life could hold learning, teaching, language, care, memory, and culture. Our bodies were not built only to survive the next hour. They were built to grow through years of dependence, then carry what had been learned into the lives of others. This makes human aging both biological and historical. A whale ages across oceans, an elephant ages inside herds and memory, a bird ages through flight, migration, and the lightness of its bones. A human ages beside tools, fire, children, stories, food sharing, shelters, grief, and the remembered behavior of the land. The body is still made of cells, blood, nerves, bone, and organs, but the meaning of its years is shaped by the world around it. In the deep beginning of human life, an older person might not have been powerful in the same way as a young adult, but they could carry knowledge that took decades to gather. A longer lifespan gave that knowledge somewhere to live. It allowed experience to overlap with childhood. It allowed warnings to pass from one season to another. It allowed the group to be more than the instincts of the young. Yet even this human advantage did not remove aging. It may have made aging more visible, because the body lasted long enough for the slow costs of life to show themselves. This is a quiet but important point. Long life does not mean freedom from decline. It means decline has more time to appear. A short-lived animal may die before many late-life problems become clear. A long-lived animal must solve the problem of maintenance for much longer, and even strong maintenance may not be perfect. Humans became long-lived enough for memory and culture to grow, but still finite enough for the marks of time to gather. Our lifespan is not an accident separate from our way of life. It belongs to the same pattern that gave us long childhood, deep learning, shared food, and older helpers. The body had to last long enough for these things to matter. It did not have to last unchanged forever. This does not answer everything, but it gives the question a wider frame. Aging evolves differently depending on how a creature meets danger and how its life continues. For humans, life continued through children, but also through teaching. It continued through birth, but also through memory. It continued through strength, but also through cooperation. The body that aged was part of this system. It was not simply a failing object at the end of use. It was a living participant in a species that survived by spreading time across many people. When we compare humans with other animals, the mystery becomes calmer and deeper. The aging process did not evolve in the same way everywhere. It followed the shape of each life. In humans, it followed a path where the body needed enough years to become wise, useful, social, and caring, but still remained bound to energy, repair, damage, and the limits of living tissue. We age differently because we survive differently. And perhaps the most human part of aging is this. Our bodies decline, but the time inside them can still move outward into others. Civilization did not create aging. The body was growing older long before fields were planted, before grain was stored, before kings counted workers, before cities raised walls, before calendars gave names to years. The first wrinkle did not wait for history. The first worn tooth did not wait for farming. The first old injury did not wait for a house, a road, or a written record. Aging belongs to the living body, and the living body is older than every civilization humans have built. Yet civilization changed how aging appeared. It did not invent the slow decline of tissue, memory, strength, and repair, but it allowed more people to live long enough for that decline to become a visible part of ordinary life. This is one of the important turns in the human story. Before settled life, many dangers could end a life early. After settled life, some dangers changed, some grew worse, and some slowly became easier to manage. The aging process remained ancient, but the human world around it began to transform. To understand this, we have to return to the point where the human body met a new kind of environment. For most of our deep past, people lived in small mobile groups, following seasonal food, sharing knowledge, and carrying their lives through landscapes that changed with weather, animals, plants, and water. The body aged there through hunger, cold, movement, infection, childbirth, injury, smoke, and the hard work of staying alive. Then, much later, some human groups began to live more permanently, near crops, animals, rivers, storage pits, and built shelters. This did not make life simple. Farming could bring food, but it could also bring hard labour, narrower diets, crowded settlements, new diseases, social inequality, and heavier dependence on a few crops. Bones and teeth from ancient farming communities often show that settled life was not always easier on the body than foraging life. The body still aged, but now it aged inside different pressures. It bent over fields. It ground grain. It carried water. It lived closer to animals and waste. It slept inside walls, but also inside crowds where infection could travel. Civilization gave humans new forms of protection, but also new forms of strain. This matters because modern people sometimes imagine aging as a problem caused by modern life alone. They see sedentary habits, processed food, stress, pollution, and long work, then assume the ancient body must have aged more naturally, perhaps more gently. But that is too simple. The aging process is much older than modern habits. Ancient people aged without chairs, without cars, without screens, without industrial food, and without city noise. They aged because cells repair imperfectly, because energy is limited, because injury leaves traces, because selection is uneven across life, and because bodies are living systems inside time. Still, modern and civilized environments changed which signs of aging became most common, most visible, or most feared. In a farming village, worn joints might come from repetitive labor. In a city, disease might spread faster. In a modern world, many people live long enough to face heart disease, dementia, cancer, frailty, and chronic conditions that would have been less visible when earlier death was more common. The body is ancient, but the stage has changed. Civilization also changed the meaning of old age. In a small prehistoric group, an older person might be known by memory, kinship, skill, and presence. In a village or city, age could become tied to property, status, labor, dependency, ritual, law, and written identity. People began to count years more carefully. They buried the dead with objects. They recorded lineages. They built houses where generations could remain near one another. Later, medicine, sanitation, safer childbirth, stored food, and public health allowed many more people to reach old age. This made aging feel more universal, not because aging was new, but because survival had changed enough to reveal it more clearly. The ancient body had always carried the possibility of later decline. Civilization widened the doorway through which more bodies could enter it. So when we ask why the aging process evolved, civilization gives us a mirror, not an origin. It shows us what happens when an old biological process meets villages, farms, cities, medicine, and longer lives. Aging was already written into flesh, but history changed how many people lived long enough to read it. When human beings began living in more permanent settlements, aging did not become new, but it became easier to notice. A person who remained near the same fields, the same houses, the same burial places, and the same family lines could be watched across many years. A child could remember the face of an elder from early life, and later see how that face had changed. A community could know who had grown slow, who still worked, who needed help, who carried authority, who remembered land boundaries, who owned grain, who performed rituals, who told the old stories, and who could no longer labor as before. In mobile worlds, age had also been visible, but settled life gave it a different kind of social shape. The body was no longer aging, only under weather, hunger, walking, and small group memory. It was aging inside houses, farms, stored food, animals, tools, neighbors, obligations, and inherited places. The ancient biological process had entered a historical world. Farming changed the body's relationship with time. Foragers often moved across landscapes, using varied foods as seasons shifted. Early farmers, depending on place and crop, might depend more heavily on grain, herds, fields, harvests, and storage. This brought a new kind of security when harvests were good, because food could be kept for later. But it also brought new vulnerability when crops failed, when drought came, when pests damaged fields, or when stored food was taken by others. The body aged inside this new rhythm of abundance and dependence. Repeated labor left marks. Grinding grain could wear shoulders, arms, backs, and teeth. Bending, digging, carrying water, hauling wood, tending animals, and working the same land year after year could shape joints in ways different from older mobile life. The body was still the ancient body, but the environment pressing on it had changed. The aging process now had new surfaces on which to appear. Settled life also changed disease. When people live close together, when animals live near people, when waste gathers, when water is shared, and when trade or movement connects communities, infections can travel in new ways. This does not mean every settlement was unhealthy in the same way, and it does not mean foraging life was free from disease. It means that civilization rearranged the risks around the body. Some dangers from wild movement may have decreased in certain places. Other dangers, especially crowding and repeated exposure, could increase. A body that might once have aged through miles of walking and irregular food might now age through hard agricultural labor, close contact with animals, smoke in dwellings, social stress, and recurring infection. The ancient process remained the same in its deep foundation. Cells still repaired, tissues still changed, energy still had limits, and late-life harms still appeared unevenly. But history changed the pattern of pressure. It changed what kinds of damage accumulated, what kinds of weakness mattered, and how visible later life became. Civilization also gave old age new meanings. In a village, an older person might become a holder of land, lineage, ritual knowledge, family memory, craft skill, or social authority. They might help decide disputes, teach planting times, remember marriages, preserve myths, care for children, or guard stored knowledge about the community. But old age could also mean dependence, hunger during shortage, loss of labor value, or vulnerability if the group could not spare enough food. The same later body could be honored in one setting and burdened in another. Human history did not make aging gentle. It made aging social in larger and more complicated ways. The body's decline became entangled with work, status, family, inheritance, gender, wealth, and belief. A worn body could be seen as wise, weak, sacred, costly, respected, ignored, protected, or feared, depending on the world around it. This is why aging cannot be understood only by looking inside the body, and also cannot be understood only by looking at society. It lives between them. The cells are ancient, but the meaning of their decline changes with culture. A stiff knee in a hunting camp, a farming village, a Bronze Age city, and a modern apartment is not the same historical experience, even if the biological tissue follows some of the same patterns. The human body carries a deep evolutionary past, but each age of history changes how that past is felt. Civilization did not invent the slow weakening of repair. It gave that weakening new surroundings, new names, new fears, and sometimes new protection. It allowed more people to survive earlier dangers, and by doing so, it brought more people face to face with the older mystery already waiting inside the body. Aging became more visible not because the body suddenly learned to decline, but because history began to hold the body long enough for decline to be seen. Modern medicine changed the face of aging more than almost anything before it. Not because it removed aging, but because it pushed back many of the dangers that once hid aging from view. A child with infection might now survive. A mother in a difficult birth might now be helped. A broken bone might be set. A wound might be cleaned. Water might be made safer. Food might be stored, transported, and protected from some forms of hunger. Vaccines, surgery, antibiotics, sanitation, and public health did something extraordinary. They allowed more bodies to pass through the old gates that had stopped so many lives early. Because of this, many people now live long enough to meet the slower questions that were always waiting inside the body. Aging did not begin in the hospital, but the hospital helped reveal it. It made visible the ancient process that earlier danger often interrupted. This is why the modern world can make aging feel like a new crisis, even though it is not new at all. When more people survive childhood, infection, childbirth, famine, injury, and the most immediate threats, the population changes shape. There are more older adults. Families may contain more living generations at once. Societies begin to build around long retirement, chronic illness, memory loss, elder care, pension systems, and medical decisions that ancient groups never had to imagine in the same way. The body is still carrying old biology, but history has extended the time in which that biology is seen. A process shaped under scarcity, danger, movement, and uncertain survival is now living inside cities, clinics, long records, and rooms where a person may survive conditions that once ended life quickly. This is one of the deepest historical turns in the story of aging. Civilization did not make the body old, but it gave the old body more years to become part of common human experience. In the beginning of human life, an aging person might have been rare enough to be noticed as someone who had crossed many dangers. In the modern world, aging has become something many people expect, fear, plan for, and watch in others. The emotional meaning has changed. Old age is no longer only a sign of having survived. It can become a medical category, a family responsibility, a social question, a personal worry, and sometimes a long period of quiet reflection. This does not make modern aging worse in every way. Many older people live with comfort, knowledge, family, medicine, and safety that our ancestors did not have. But it does make the ancient limits of the body harder to ignore. The joints still remember movement. The immune system still changes. The brain still needs energy, blood flow, sleep, and repair. Cells still carry damage. Tissues still lose some resilience. The body still belongs to evolution, even when it is surrounded by technology. Here lies an important truth. Modern life can change how aging appears, but it cannot easily erase the deep reasons aging exists. A person may live in a warm house, eat food from distant lands, receive surgery, take medicine, and sleep under a roof, yet the body beneath these protections is still descended from bodies that live near fire, hunger, childbirth, wounds, infection, and the need to pass life forward. We are not modern machines that happen to break. We are ancient organisms living in a modern shelter. Civilization has stretched the road, softened some dangers, and given names to many forms of decline. But the road is still travelled by flesh shaped long before civilization began. This is why the story of aging must move carefully between gratitude and honesty. It would be wrong to say that the modern world simply damaged the body and caused old age. It would also be wrong to say that modern protection solved the ancient problem. What history did was reveal the problem more fully. It allowed more people to reach the distant rooms of life where slow repair, old costs, delayed harms, and accumulated damage become visible. The aging process was already inside the human body, but civilization gave it a larger stage. And on that stage we can see the old mystery with clearer eyes. The same progress that helps us live longer also brings us closer to the limits that evolution never completely removed. The modern body lives inside shelters that would have seemed impossible for most of human history. It sleeps under roofs, warms itself without gathering wood, eats food carried from distant places, drinks water made safer by systems it rarely sees, and survives many illnesses that once would have taken a life quickly. Yet under all this protection, the body remains ancient. The skin still repairs as skin repaired beside fires. The immune system still reacts with old urgency. The muscles still weaken when unused. The bones still respond to weight, movement, hunger, hormones, and age. The brain still needs sleep, rhythm, social safety, and quiet. The heart still beats with the same basic design that carried earlier humans across cold ground, dry grass, river valleys, and long migrations. This is the strange meeting at the center of modern aging. We live in a world that has changed faster than the body that lives inside it. Civilization gave us longer roads, but the traveler is still made from older flesh. In the deep beginning of human life, the body expected hardship, but not in the way modern people often imagine. It was not built for constant comfort, and it was not built for constant emergency. It was shaped for cycles, hunger and food, danger and rest, cold and warmth, movement and stillness, social stress and social repair. A body might walk far, then sleep near others. It might face fear, then return to the calm of the group. It might go without food, then eat when food was found. It might use great strength, then recover through rest, touch, warmth, and time. These rhythms were not perfect or gentle, but they gave the body patterns it could recognize. Modern life often breaks those patterns in unusual ways. Food can be abundant without movement. Stress can continue without physical escape. Light can enter the night. Loneliness can exist even in crowded cities. Work can tire the mind while leaving the muscles unused. The body is not foolish for struggling with this. It is responding with systems shaped in an older world. This does not mean modern life is simply bad for aging. That would be too simple. Modern life also protects the body in ways our ancestors could not have imagined. It reduces many infections. It helps births that would have been dangerous. It repairs injuries. It keeps people warm. It allows rest during sickness. It gives sight back through surgery, protects teeth, manages pain, and extends life through knowledge built over generations. These are real human achievements, but they do not remove the body's ancient trade-offs. They reveal them in new settings. A body that once stored energy to survive scarcity may now meet constant food. A stress system once shaped for short danger may now meet long worry. A sleep rhythm once tied to darkness, fire, and group safety may now meet artificial light and restless thought. A musculoskeletal system shaped by daily movement may now sit for hours. The aging process is still ancient, but modern life changes the way its signs gather. This is why we should be careful when speaking about modern aging. It is not honest to say that our ancestors were naturally healthy and we are simply broken. Ancient people suffered greatly from injuries, infection, tooth wear, childbirth, hunger, cold, parasites, and violence. It is also not honest to say that modern medicine has solved the deep problem of aging. It has helped many bodies live longer, but longer life gives aging more time to become visible. We are living between two truths. The modern world protects us from many ancient dangers, while the ancient body still carries limits shaped by those dangers. When an older person today feels stiffness after sitting, poor sleep after stress, weakness after inactivity, or slower healing after illness, these are not only modern inconveniences, they are reminders that the body still expects a world of movement, rest, contact, rhythm, and physical meaning. The first human body was never separate from its environment, and neither is ours. We may live behind glass, walls, screens, schedules, and medicine, but aging still happens through tissue that listens to food, light, sleep, movement, fear, care, and time. The modern body is not a new body. It is an old inheritance living under new conditions. And in that meeting, the question becomes quieter. What happens when a body shaped for ancient uncertainty is asked to grow old inside a world it did not evolve to expect? The modern body often suffers not because it is weak, but because it is being asked to read an unfamiliar world with ancient senses. Hunger once meant something close to need. Now appetite can be stirred by smell, habit, stress, memory, loneliness, or food designed to be easy to eat long after the body has received enough energy. Night once arrived with darkness, falling temperature, quieter movement, and the safety or danger of the group. Now light can continue deep into the hours when the brain once expected a slower sky. Work once used the legs, back, hands, eyes, and balance across changing ground. Now many people spend long days with the mind active and the body almost still. None of this means the past was better. The ancient world could be cold, painful, hungry, and dangerous, but it does mean the body's old systems may meet modern signals in confusing ways. Aging becomes more visible in that confusion because the body still depends on rhythm, movement, rest, repair, and social connection to keep its inner order. In the beginning of human life, the body was shaped by direct feedback. If food was scarce, the body felt scarcity. If the day required walking, the muscles, bones, lungs, and heart were reminded of their purpose. If night was dangerous, sleep became social, light, and responsive. If the group was safe, touch, voice, warmth, and shared presence helped the nervous system settle. The body learned the world through repeated contact with land, weather, hunger, effort, and other people. Modern life can separate those signals. A person may eat without real hunger, feel tired without physical work, remain stressed without immediate danger, feel lonely while surrounded by people, and stay awake while the body's older clock is asking for darkness. Over decades, these separations may change how aging is felt. The body still ages through cells, repair, inflammation, hormones, and accumulated damage, but the surrounding world changes the pressure on each of those systems. This is why the modern body facing aging should not be blamed as if it has failed a test. It is carrying old equipment into new rooms. A stress response once useful for short danger may remain awake during long worry. Energy storage once useful for famine may become difficult when food is constant and movement is low. A sleep system once guided by sunset, firelight, temperature, and group safety may struggle under artificial light, noise, and anxious thought. A body once strengthened by ordinary movement may lose reserve when movement becomes optional. These are not simple causes of aging, and they are not the whole story, but they shape the way ancient aging appears in modern life. The same biological process can feel different depending on whether the body is walking daily, sleeping deeply, eating with real rhythm, living with others, or spending years in tension without full recovery. The deep human origin remains close. Our ancestors did not have perfect health, but their bodies were constantly reminded that life was physical. Carrying, climbing, gathering, digging, holding children, making tools, enduring cold, and sleeping near others gave the body signals that modern life can remove or distort. The modern person may live longer and safer, yet still feel strangely disconnected from the conditions that once helped the body regulate itself. This does not mean we should return to danger. It means we should understand the body honestly. The goal is not to worship the past, but to see the inheritance beneath the present. Aging was not invented by chairs, electric light, cities, or modern food. Aging is older than all of them. But these things can change how the ancient process unfolds, because the body listens to its environment every day. A joint listens to movement, a muscle listens to use, a brain listens to sleep and light. An immune system listens to infection, stress, rest, and time. A heart listens to effort, fear, calm, and recovery. A body growing older in the modern world is still asking the same old questions. Is there enough energy? Is there danger? Is there rest? Is there connection? Is there repair? When the answers become confused, the aging body may feel more burdened. And yet, even here, the story is not hopeless. The very fact that the body responds to its environment means it remains alive, listening, adjusting, and trying to keep order. Modern aging is the ancient body continuing its old work inside a world filled with new signals. The modern body is often described as if it were trapped between two worlds. One world belongs to deep time. Millions of years of evolution, countless generations, long walks across landscapes, uncertain food, shared fires, dependent children, injuries, recovery, and the constant need to adapt. The other world belongs to recent history. Cities, medicine, electricity, transportation, stored food, digital communication, climate control, and lives that can extend far beyond what many ancestors experienced. Aging unfolds at the meeting point of these worlds. The body carries an ancient inheritance, but it experiences that inheritance under conditions that are historically new. This does not create aging, yet it changes how aging is lived, understood, feared, and sometimes accepted. One of the most remarkable things about the modern human condition is that many people now have the opportunity to observe their own aging over a long period of time. A prehistoric hunter-gatherer might have spent most of life focused on immediate survival, family, weather, food, injury, and movement. A modern person may spend decades noticing small changes in sleep, energy, memory, vision, balance, hearing, strength, recovery, and emotional experience. Medical tests can measure changes that earlier humans could never have named. Photographs can preserve faces across decades. Written records can document illnesses, treatments, and family histories. The aging process, once hidden within the ordinary flow of life, becomes something that can be watched almost in real time. Yet despite all this knowledge, the body itself remains surprisingly familiar to its ancestors. It still heals wounds using ancient biological systems. It still responds to danger with increased heart rate and alertness. It still depends on movement to maintain muscle and bone. It still requires sleep to restore order. It still becomes vulnerable when isolated from social support. Beneath modern language, modern science, and modern technology, the body remains a descendant of bodies that survived in caves, grasslands, forests, river valleys, coastal environments, and ice age landscapes. This continuity matters because it changes the way we think about aging. Aging is often treated as an enemy, something external that attacks the body from outside. But evolution suggests a different picture. Aging is not an invader arriving late in life. It is woven into the same biological fabric that allows growth, healing, reproduction, memory, and adaptation. The systems that support life also create the conditions under which aging becomes possible. Cells divide, repair, communicate, defend, and respond. Over time, these activities leave traces. The body remains alive because it is active, and because it is active, it cannot remain unchanged forever. In the ancient world, this truth may have been easier to see. A person who had lived many years carried visible evidence of survival. Weather had touched the skin, work had shaped the hands, walking had shaped the feet, food had shaped the teeth, memory had shaped the face. Aging was not hidden from life. It was part of life. Modern culture sometimes separates aging from living, as if the first is a problem interrupting the second. But the evolutionary story suggests something quieter. Aging may be the continuation of life, not its interruption. The same processes that carried a child into adulthood continue operating through middle age and beyond. They do not stop. They simply change. This does not remove the sadness that aging can bring. Bodies become more fragile. Recovery becomes slower. Loss becomes more familiar. People watch parents age, then watch themselves age. No evolutionary explanation can erase those experiences, but understanding where aging comes from may change how we see it. The aging body is not evidence that evolution failed. It is evidence that evolution built a body capable of surviving, learning, caring, teaching, remembering, and adapting across many years, even though those years could never be endless. Perhaps this is the deepest lesson of the modern body. We are living longer than many of our ancestors, yet we are carrying the same ancient inheritance. The body still remembers the world that shaped it. It still responds to rhythms older than civilization. It still carries traces of hunger, movement, danger, care, and recovery written into its biology. Aging is not something that arrived after human history. It traveled through all of human history, quietly accompanying every generation from the first fires to the present day. Aging may be one of the oldest questions hidden inside the human body because it forces us to think about what life was trying to achieve in the first place. Throughout this long journey, we have followed aging through ancient landscapes, through hunger and abundance, through firelight and cities, through cells and civilizations, through grandparents and children, through memory and time. Each path led to the same realization. The body was never built in isolation. It was built inside a living world filled with danger, opportunity, cooperation, reproduction, learning, and change. When we ask why the aging process evolved, we are not only asking why the body declines, we are asking why a body capable of extraordinary survival was not made to remain unchanged forever. The answer remains incomplete because science itself is still exploring the question. Different explanations reveal different pieces of the puzzle. Energy must be divided between repair and other needs. Damage accumulates despite constant maintenance. Natural selection acts more strongly at some stages of life than others. Some biological systems that help early survival may carry costs later. Human beings may also have benefited from lives long enough to share knowledge, care for descendants, and carry memory across generations. None of these ideas alone explains everything. Together, they suggest that aging is not the result of a single mistake. It emerges from the same evolutionary history that produced growth, healing, reproduction, learning, attachment, and adaptation. The body did not fail to become immortal. The body became something else. It became a bridge. It carries life from one generation into the next. It carries knowledge from older minds into younger ones. It carries memories through time. It survives cold, hunger, disease, injury, grief, and uncertainty for as long as it can. Then another body continues the journey. This does not make aging easy. The experience of growing older can include pain, loss, limitation, and change. But understanding aging through the lens of evolution may offer a different perspective. The aging body is not separate from the living body. It is the living body continuing its work across time. The same processes that allow us to grow also allow us to age. The same systems that help us survive leave traces of survival behind. Every scar, every memory, every adaptation, every lesson learned by the body becomes part of a longer story. Perhaps that is why aging has accompanied humanity from the beginning. Before cities, before agriculture, before writing, before history itself, bodies were already carrying time within them. Every generation inherited a body shaped by countless generations before it. Every generation passed something forward. In that sense, aging is not only about decline, it is also about continuity. It reminds us that no human life stands alone. We arrive carrying the inheritance of the past, and we leave traces that continue beyond us. The body grows older, but knowledge can remain. Strength fades, but care can remain. Memory softens, but influence can remain. The individual life is finite, yet it participates in something much larger than itself. And after everything we have explored, one quiet mystery still remains. If evolution shaped a body capable of surviving, learning, loving, teaching, remembering, and adapting across so many years, why did it stop where it did, and not a little farther?